Looking for the best astrology guidance? You can enjoy an entire month of personalized astrology services for just $3.99. At Serious Joy, we pride ourselves on providing astrology enthusiasts with exactly what they're looking for: daily personalized inspiration that speaks directly to the heart. Sign up today and you'll receive personalized messages straight to your phone 7 days a week. And that's just half of it. You'll also get access to our exclusive members-only site with tons of amazing features. Experience the most accurate astrology service on the web at SeriousJoy.com.
Hello and welcome to Namaste Today Live. I am your host, psychic astrologer, Sensei Christopher Witecki, here to be your cosmic guide to your personal ascension and help you find the star that you really are. We are streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and X.com, formerly known as Twitter. And if you are in the super chat, please tell us where you are watching from and say hello to the rest of our community. Now, this particular show has been pre-taped. I'm going to let you know that right now, but it is streaming live. In other words, our director is streaming this live. Our producer, Noel Way, is in the chat room. But I, right now, am in Mexico, enjoying myself for the new year. But I do want to say hello to some special super friends. Michelle Camper. Hello, Michelle Bell. Hello, Kat Ryder. My soul brother, I'm assuming you're here, Daryl Blankenship. Margot Malia making some music with us today, and Neptune Girl. Hello to everyone. And today, let's add on also Sydney. Always good to see you, Sydney. We appreciate you. We are ready to blast off into the new year, and we have quite a show for you today. We have Mercury squaring Neptune this week, which is going to radically shift the narrative as if it hadn't already hit the fan. That is, shift hitting the fan. The sun is trining Uranus, which means there's a big boost in your financial potential this week. And the new moon in Capricorn jumpstarts the new era later this week on Thursday. But tonight, we also have a phenomenal interview on Astro Mingle. Traditional and Uranian astrologer, journalist, author, clinical hypnotherapist Mychal A. Bryan is here to dive deep and talk about his book, Mastering Traditional Astrology. But first, let's take a look at the week's moods and your zodiac weather. This zodiac weather is from Saturday, January 6th to Friday, January 12th, 2024. Looking ahead at your weekend forecast, it's going to be really smooth and easygoing as we accept the new potential for managing our life. Let's drill down. On Saturn Day, it's sunny and profound. Step 15 means Venus rules the day, so it's a creative, resting, and receiving day. You are accepting a new daily directive in your life. Now, with the sun squaring Chiron, you're probably also coming to some amends with a relationship. The moon in Scorpio makes all boundaries rather clean. On Sunday, it's cloudy and focused. Step 16 means Neptune rules the day, so you are tuning in to your spirit for affirmation. But because the sun is in Capricorn, this spiritual guidance is rather sharp, and today you are preparing for takeoff as the moon shifts into Sagittarius and you start to replay the story you tell yourself. Moving ahead to the 5-day weekday moodcast, over the course of this upcoming week, you are initiating a countdown sequence and shifting your inner dimension. On Monday, it's sunny and encouraging. Step 17 means it's a Grandmaster Capricorn day. You are making Grandmaster commitments for 2024, and Mercury squaring Neptune, you're also squaring off with your destiny. Also, it's Love Fest Day. Tell everyone you love that you love them. On Tuesday, it's sunny and expectant. Step 18 means this is a Mars-ruled day. You may be a little impatient, and the moon is shifting into Capricorn for a countdown to the new moon. On this day, you are putting your commitments into action, and there's a lot of karma unfolding as the sun trines Uranus, upping the game of your potential, and Mars sextiles Saturn, calling you on believing in yourself. On Wednesday, it's sunny and super motivated. Step 19 means Earth rules the day, so this is the day where you're holding loving space to manifest the new direction. You will feel yourself moving to the next level. And with the sun squaring the nodes, your heart is also reconciling with a new character on the horizon. On Thursday, it's cloudy and capable. It's also the new moon in Capricorn. The moon in Capricorn and the sun will come together at step 20, meaning the moon is ruling this new moon. And Venus is trining Chiron, which means you are correlating your story with relationship healing. And then on Friday, it's sunny and bold. Step 21 means Jupiter rules the day. This is the aftermath of the new moon, and now you are feeling free to expand into new control methods. You're basically acting now on your inner credit. Mars is trining Jupiter, which means you are also feeling your self-worth. And with the moon now in Aquarius, you might be feeling a little galactic.
It's serious joy, joy, joy.
And if you're watching on YouTube, please be kind and do subscribe to our YouTube channel, Serious Joy TV. Hit the bell button so you're notified, and please like this video if you don't mind, so the YouTube algorithm will promote you or promote us to other people that enjoy astrology. Namaste Today Live is sponsored by SeriousJoy.com. We are a spiritual life coaching ascension service to help you in your daily life using the details of your natal chart to help you grow in your brightest light. We have a full team of light here to help you as well. We have podcasts 7 days a week that we call Pep Talks, which are anchored by myself and metaphysical astrologer Robbie Hunt. We have daily angel guidance with angel intuitive reader Devin Doer. We have daily sound healing with the Sound Drop with Kristen Ryder. And we have new moon and full moon lunar ceremonies with artisan Joe Zammit. We'll also have some details at the end of the show about the special programming going live this week. Also, the Countdown 2024 webinar is going to be happening on January 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. For details, go to newyears.guru. If you're not familiar, this is be a special 2.5-hour, 3-hour webinar where you will be in a Zoom room with me. I'll be going over the entire year in detail, giving you the highlights, giving you a game plan for how to plan out your year. And I have to say, this is going to be probably the most profound year you have ever lived in your life. You want to be on the crest of that wave. And if you're on our email list, you will actually get a discount. So be sure to sign up on the email list. It's at newyears.guru. Look forward to seeing you there. All right, we have a lot to talk about tonight, friends. So without further ado, let's move on to our planets and transits. Well, now that the first week of the year is finally underway, we're moving into the real meat and potatoes of January. And January is extremely important, my friend, for the future of 2024, because Capricorn, if you're not familiar, is the business sign of the zodiac. Now, I believe the 12 signs are really 12 states of consciousness. We all have 12 states of human consciousness. That's what the signs are. Capricorn is the part of our consciousness that sees things through to the end. It is our responsibility consciousness. It is our ability to manage, to lead, to organize and control for the sake of control. Like Virgos can organize a garage like there's no other, but a Capricorn knows what to sell in that garage and what will get the best price. Capricorn energy is the part of us that we use to manage all of life. And what's interesting is, because Pluto is leaving Capricorn at the end of this year, it actually will leave here at January 20th. It'll go back in between September and November, but for the most part, this is the last time in your life that you'll experience the sun in Capricorn with Pluto in Capricorn at the same time. Pluto has been in Capricorn for 15 years. It first entered in 2008. And when Pluto enters into a sign, it means that that sign must go through a major conscious upgrade to a new level. And the way we are coining this here at Serious Joy and at our home site, seriousjoy.com, is that January is about launching the new era and leaving power for power's sake. That's how we look at it. I believe the old Capricorn, and when I say old Capricorn, I mean the Capricorn energy since 1776, okay? Prior to 1776, the last time Pluto was in Capricorn, there was another version of power, and that power was basically through kings and queens, through monarchies. So it was a very much, pyramid, only the very exclusive at the top. on top of everyone at the bottom. That was the first Capricorn. Then after the United States was birthed and Pluto went through Capricorn, we had a wider top, but it's still with less at the bottom. So we sort of widened power to allow other people. For the first time in world history, you could come from nothing and become something. You didn't have to be born to a certain family to have power or authority. You didn't have to necessarily be wealthy. You could become wealthy through your cotton crops or whatever crops were here in the United States. Of course, it was tobacco and cotton, basically. And I know there were some bad things done in regard to that, but I'm just saying there was, for the first time, the last time Pluto was in Capricorn, for an individual to rise up and basically rewrite their stripes, so to speak. Well, now Pluto has gone through Capricorn again. And so we are also seeing at this stage, I think, some similar trends that we saw at the end of the last Pluto Capricorn transit. We are having taxation without representation. If you don't believe that, just go to the grocery store. How have the prices gone up? Do they need to go up? Do we really have a food shortage? Why are prices going up so highly? Why are prices going up, let's say, in online entertainment? That's taxation without representation. So the current Capricorn system is still riddled with a lot of greed and corruption and power for power's sake. And this month, you have the option to opt out of that particular regime. Now, I know what you're saying. Chris, I'm not in it for power's sake. Well, we are allowing that to happen. We are allowing ourselves, giving away our power to certain situations, giving our money to certain corporations that continue to do things that we don't believe in. We're opting in to processed food instead of growing our own food or going to farmers markets. We do have a choice as to where we spend our dollar, which is where we give power. So we are at this stage now, as Pluto goes into Aquarius, you're going to feel empowered to become independent. Pluto in Aquarius promotes freedom, independence, individuality, cooperation, collaboration. It's basically the pronoun we. The pronoun we is the number one pronoun of Pluto in Aquarius. It's all about the we. It's no longer about just the I. We must consider the other person. So in this month of January, as we go through the final loop of the sun going through Capricorn, and that final, while Pluto is also there, the world's not ending. Don't worry. We'll have Capricorn next year. We just won't have Pluto also in Capricorn at the same time. You can be on the creme de la creme, on the very tip innovation edge of those who are opting out of power for power's sake. And that would mean one of two things. Either you are lording over people, or you are allowing yourself to be lorded over. Now, I'm not saying it's time for a revolution. In fact, I'm saying it's time for a re-evolution. It's time to evolve. Fortunately, due to the forefathers of the United States, and I can't speak for other countries, and, you know, by the way, hello, Australia, hello, Great Britain, hello, every English-speaking country that watches this show. Even with YouTube Translate, there's probably also people who don't speak English who can now see this show. We're so grateful to have you. And I want you to know I'm not necessarily US-centric. I believe in a global civilization in the future, but I am here primarily rooted in the United States. And so some of my show is going to focus specifically on what we can do in the United States. And I appreciate anyone in the comments who are from different countries to talk about what you will do in your country and let me know. I will support you. I believe in this worldwide. But going back to the United States, I almost think that the forefathers, when they wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the freedom of press and, you know, the right to remain silent and these types of things, I think they were actually thinking ahead to this moment. I think they were envisioning the next time Pluto was in Capricorn. And some of the forefathers were astrologers. It's quite possible that they were, in fact, aware of that. Now, they didn't know about Pluto. Pluto hadn't been discovered at that time. So they may not have understood it from the same perspective that I do. But if you look at the intention of the American Constitution at the time, it seems like it was most needed right now where we happen to be today on Earth. So in the next 3 weeks or so, the remainder 20 days or so of Capricorn, the structure of the energy is going to be that as the sun moves up through different degrees, you have the ability to opt into the old power for power's sake or opt out. And this is done on a very microcosm level in your life. By the way, making a decision and a commitment is not the same as action. Step 8 is I commit. That's Capricorn. So through the sign of Capricorn, we make commitments or we end commitments. So in the next 20 days or so, we will make or break commitments that we have, and then we will take the rest of the year to implement those decisions. So I want you to know, committing doesn't mean you immediately take action. You don't have to necessarily jump off the cliff or pull off the Band-Aid really fast. You can be reasonable in the implementation. However, I do believe, based on human consciousness, that once you make a decision, this is sort of like a key bolt, a key screw that holds together the system. Once you're committed, everything builds on top of that, manifestation and everything past that. So commitment is very important. In fact, a lot of times, I have to say, in personal readings, I'll have people come to me and say, I'm having trouble manifesting. And I'm like, well, what are you trying to manifest? And they'll say, I'm not quite sure what I should manifest. Well, that's it right there. If you're not committed to what you want to manifest, you're not going to go to step 9, taking action, step 10, manifestation, step 11, it becoming real. So it's a key point, right? And that's why really the decision making, which in modern society are the laws are the formal written decisions in legislature. Decisions are the epicenter of power and control. And that's true on the individual spiritual level as well. So in this next wrap up of the sun in Capricorn, as the sun rises through these degrees, each day I call upon your heart to make a decision, and think of it from the perspective of what you feel your purpose is and what you feel you are here to do. Ultimately, if you want to make a high vibration or ascended decision, if you want to decide according to the new era and not the old era, then decide from your heart and your feelings. If you decide from your heart and your feelings, you're not making a decision of power for power's sake. You're making a decision for the sake of your heart, which automatically is for the sake of your soul. And when you include your emotional field also, then you also include everyone else in the world. Because if you feel it out, if you're about to stomp on a little guy, you're going to feel it. Your soul's going to tell you through a feeling. You're going to have a sensation. You might be all caught up in your heart about wanting to do something great and exciting for yourself. So you want to first make the decision based on your heart, but then ask your feelings. Do I feel this is appropriate? Do I feel this is the right time? Do I feel there will be any resistance from this? And most certainly there may be some resistance. To me, the only moral that you want to be certain of is that you're not going to take free will from another person, rob from another person, eliminate a person's ability to also thrive. There's room for everyone on the earth, and that's part of the pronoun we of the age of Aquarius. It's all about the we and no longer just about the me. So with that said, this is a very powerful month because in essence, you are going to, between now and January 20th, that's when the sun will move into Aquarius. And by the way, it's a pretty orchestrated event. The sun and Pluto will conjoin in Capricorn, okay, at 29 degrees and 59 minutes Capricorn. The very bleeding final edge, they come together, which is very historic. I mean, I've gone back in astrology. I don't have the time to go back past 1,000 years, but I can't find a time when the sun has squared Pluto. It tells me the sun is the heart. It is love. And so our heart is escorting Pluto into Aquarius. And that means that our heart is initiating the new era. So between now and January 20th, it will be about making decisions that opt into your new seat of power. And the new seat of power, in my humble opinion, is heart-based, love-based. If there's any clue about morality, ask yourself this simple question. Does your heart agree with what you're about to do? If your heart agrees with it, and it's something very negative, first of all, the heart will not agree to something negative, not the heart. It takes a cold SOB to do something heartless. You know, it's sort of a built-in thing. If you listen to your heart, you won't want to step on the bug. You won't want to take advantage of others. You won't want to hurt another human being. So really, it's a very, very simple formula that you can apply in any decision you make going forward. Is my heart into this? Does my heart endorse this? Do I feel it's appropriate? That's it. Heart and feelings, you've made a high vibration decision. So in that context, in the first degrees of Capricorn leading up to New Year's, we were basically building a new inner governance of ourself. That was the first stage of this, where it was time to govern ourselves in a new way. I talked about this in last week's show. That's the week we just lived up until now, was stepping into that new governance and starting to explore some of our options in daily life. That was the last week. We're just exploring the options. This week, we're calling the week Initiating Countdown Sequence. So this is the week where we initiate the countdown sequence, countdown to the new era. And we're using the imagery of a rocket here at Serious Joy. We're having a good time with it, kind of seeing ourselves blasting off. I almost see the new moon that will happen on Thursday is the official launch into the new era, by the way. And then we'll hit the outer sphere, we'll hit the outer space, so to speak, of the new dimension when the sun moves into Aquarius. And then we'll have another booster at the end of the month on the 27th. So there's these sort of boosts up in personal power. It means that you are elevating out of your old power structure in order to get into the new power structure. And what it ultimately means, and I've had this conversation with my personal Sensei subscribers, for the most part, to opt out of the old power and power for power's sake means that your ego has to take one for the team. That your ego will probably have to not be right. Your ego cannot show them. Your ego cannot prove to them. Your ego cannot make a point. If you want to ascend to this next level, I think the only way to do it is to really tell the ego to sit. And as far as other observers are concerned, ha ha, you lost, I won. But not really. They're winning the battle, but they're not winning the war. The war is to ascend to a higher vibration. So I think a lot of the power shift over the month and over this week, particularly this week, we have a step 17 day on Monday, is you have to make a decision for your ascension and for your benefit and completely turn your back on whatever old conflicts or power struggles that may have happened. So I spoke to this in last week's show, the third option. We have been told, oh, it's either Republican or Democrat. It's either up or down. It's either good or evil. And that dualistic thinking of polarity is the age of Pisces. All right. The third eye is the enlightened age, when we have a new sight. That third eye is halfway between the two options. It's the neutral choice. It's that I choose neither A or B. I choose none of the above, or I choose option C. So as we go through this week to initiate countdown sequence, if you think about a rocket, they pull the launch pad away from the rocket. They pull off the little, I think tubes that are like feeding it with liquid oxygen or liquid hydrogen. I don't know the chemistry of it. I just kind of briefly know. So forgive me for someone, an expert in there, put in the chat what it is. And that's what's sort of happening this week as we initiate countdown sequence. We have to remove the conflicts, the battles, the arguing, whatever that may come up that keep you in the fight, that keep you in the duality, that keep you in the us versus them. That us versus them mentality, I personally believe, and I said this last week, I believe 1/3 of the population is going to ascend in 2024. When I mean ascend, I mean we go running down yellow brick road, totally having a good time, manifesting our life, while the world will be in chaos, because part of the world will continue to be in that duality and fight back and forth as I'm right, no, I am, trying to prove whose God is right or whose politics are right or whose politician is right. That whole argument is an energy vampire system that cannot be won. It's designed to not win. I believe 1/3 will go to this third eye perspective, to this third option perspective, and begin to manifest. I believe 1/3 will double down and insist on it being the old way, power for power's sake, only a few people at the top of the pyramid. And I think there'll be about 1/3 that are in the middle and undecided, who are going to sit and wait and sort of watch to see which of these other two extreme sides end up prevailing, is what I believe. That's my theory. We'll see. I'll see you here in 1 year in 2025, and we'll see if I was correct on this. But so we are initiating countdown sequence. We are doing it by removing the things that will keep our rocket from blasting. We're removing the conflicts in our life. We are ending the arguments, and we're putting our energy into the third option, the third eye view perspective. Now, while this is happening, The subtitle of the week is Shifting Our Inner Dimension. Shifting Our Inner Dimension. There are many things happening this week, and I'll speak to it specifically, where you have to kind of get comfortable in this new seat of yours. Breaking free from your old control mechanisms was just the first start. So like the first thing we did from Christmas to New Year's basically was we removed parts of ourself that fight with ourselves. So we ended the fight with ourself, and that immediately raises you to a higher vibration by ending the fight with yourself. But then ending the fight with yourself is not necessarily the seat of success. That's not the driver's seat to launch the new age or the new era. You're going to have to find that you have to get your vibration and the way you work inside of you to get on the side of your heart, to quiet the chitter chatter of your mind, to neutralize your feelings that might be upset, to quiet the ego and tell it to be quiet and support the heart. There's a lot of inner adjustment. So the subplot of the week is that you have to shift your inner vibration and inner dimension and come from a different dimension inside of yourself. Now, what I recommend from the global perspective is it's not fake it till you make it. It's make it till you see it. Okay. So make the new dimension, live the new life. I challenge you. And maybe that's the old system saying it's a challenge. Maybe that's not part of the we, that's part of the I. I challenge you to try to go ahead and act like who you will be a year from now, to go ahead and vibrate to the successful author, walk around as a successful CEO, walk around as a successful parent, walk around as a happily married man or woman, walk around with that vibration and see how it feels. Does it fit right? Does it feel natural? Does it vibrate as who you are? Where would you make changes? What's not comfortable? What needs to be altered? And really allow your inner dimension to shift. The key question of the week is, do I feel ready? Do I feel ready? And the important thing here about feeling ready is the earth in Cancer. Well, the sun's in Capricorn, the earth is in Cancer. And so we are manifesting a new feeling about ourselves. Emotion and feeling is the only way to know that you're in the right place. And we've reached a point now with Ascension. You know, someone said to me recently, I said this last week, and one of my staff, I think, countered it. I think it was Kristen Ryder who countered it to her benefit. Thank you, Kristen. We were saying we've never in our lives before ascended on Earth, but we probably have actually on other planets if you're a starseed. So if you're a starseed, you probably already rode a planet from darkness into the light and already done this. That's why you came here to Earth, to help it happen again. But ultimately, we don't have an Earth's history and Earth's record, a time of coming out of dark into the light, except for the caveman era. And my point is that your mind doesn't know, your belief structure doesn't know, your intuition can sense, but the only way you know you're not going to get eaten by a crocodile or go down the wrong path is to pay attention to your feelings. So it's almost like we're blindfolded now, and we have to feel our way into this future. And so ask yourself, do you feel ready? Do you feel like it's time? Do you feel like you can do this? Now, we also have some extra guidance from Devin Doer. She's our angel intuitive on SeriousJoy.com. And Devin gave a few notes in our last meeting about what the angels have to say for this week. One of them is that this is, in fact, the launch. So the angels affirm this is the launch, and it's time to prove to yourself that you are ready. You don't have to prove to the world. You have to prove it to yourself. The angel's advice is to focus on the small tasks rather than the big picture. And I thought that was a very profound insight, clearly from the angels, because I didn't think of it. Devin didn't either. And that is, we all have these lofty goals for how we want our rocket ship to make it to Mars or our rocket ship to make it to another planet. But don't focus on the whole ship and the plan. Focus on, are you in your spacesuit? Do you have the countdown sequence? Have you checked off all the things? It's literally like a pre-flight checklist. Make sure all the small things are doing well. Master the tiniest little things in your life. Master the way you cook breakfast. Master the way you speak to your child about an event. And the rest will take care of themselves. And the last point from Devin was, what are you communicating to the world this week? What message are you trying to send? What are you wanting people to know? And to be aware of the fact that either through action or from a literal message, you are sending a message to the world. Those are the keys and tips from the angelic realm. Thank you, Devin, for that. We appreciate you. So looking at the planets this week, by the way, goes from Saturday, January 6th to Friday, January 12th. We will go from step 15. The sun will go from step 15 Capricorn to step 21 Capricorn. That will be the sun's arc over the course of this week. So we have basically 3 planets that are in Capricorn right now. We have the sun, we have Mars, and we have Pluto. The sun, of course, is our heart. And going from 15 to 21, basically 15 is finding peace and accepting that you're ready for this countdown. 16 is you connect to God and make sure this is your plight. 17, which is Monday, is when you commit that you're going to blast off. 18 is when you initiate the countdown sequence. 19 is when you're now in motion to manifest. And 20 is when you blast off. And 20, by the way, is in essence the new moon at step 20. So it literally is the planting of the seed to blast off. Now, how does this apply in your literal life? Well, I would say that Monday, you make the important decision. Tuesday, you act on it. Wednesday, you hold steady and see if there's anything flaw with it. And Thursday, you put all your passion and emotion behind it. You make it happen. So it's time to launch that. I would launch anything that represents or symbolizes where you want to go. If you don't have a project per se to launch literally, then launch a new behavior, launch the new way of being, start to play the role of the vibration of the new person that you want to become. Now, Mars moves from 1 to 5 degrees, and 1 to 5 degrees really is our own self-discipline, how we manage ourselves, how we show up for ourselves. And so at the same time of launching the show, this is where you have to shift your inner dimension. Mars is saying, okay, get your shift together. It's time to stand tall. It's time to show up. It's time to get up on time. It's time to eat nutritionally. You know what you have to do for success. I mean, the planets show that ignorance is no longer a possibility. Everyone knows better now and would do otherwise. Okay, so we've been waking up since 2012. The excuse of I didn't know better isn't going to fly, and your angels certainly know you're full of shift also. So Mars in these degrees says that there's going to be a lot of pep in your step. You're going to feel stronger than usual. You're going to feel more ready to make a decision. If anything, don't make a rash decision. Make sure your heart and your feelings agree with it. And that's true with the sun as well. Anything the sun is committing to, make sure it's endorsed by the heart. It needs 2 signatures. Your heart and your emotions must sign off on this. If it's only something your mind is coming up with, it's suspect. If it's something only your ego is coming up with, it's majorly suspect. And if it's something your intuition is coming up with, it's also suspect, because your intuition could be picking up on another lifetime. It could be picking up on another version of you. Intuition is galactic. It can be anywhere. It doesn't always apply literally to the moment. Our ability to read the moment is really our heart and our emotions. Now, Pluto is rock steady at 29 degrees Capricorn. That does mean that there is going to be tests of power. I think we're going to see some overreaches of power. I think there are people trying to push the envelope, people trying to sneak over the border, so to speak, or trying to cheat, let's say, on a form or on some sort of funding. So it also means that you're probably threatening the power in your life. In other words, your homeowners association is not going to like this, or Uncle Bob is not going to like this, or the church is not going to like this. I mean, there might be a lot of things that aren't going to like it. And and what is our response? Our response is, I'm not going to go there. I'm taking the third option. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to prove that I'm right. I'm not going to try to win over, because if I'm trying to win you over, I'm saying you have the power. Let me win you over. So if I have to convince you, then I'm saying you have the power. Let me convince you. The third perspective is, I'm just going to go. Let's see if they stop me. All right. Now, I think that'll work for the dark as well. I think dark energies will also say, let's see if they stop me. And I'm not saying we should sit there and allow something to trespass upon us. No, don't allow anything to trespass upon you. Don't allow anyone to take your power, but don't ask permission for you to live in your heart and do what you want to do. Go running for that goal and express the star that you really are. Now, back in the land of Sagittarius, we have 2 planets right now, Venus and Mercury. Mercury energetically has stationed direct, is stationed direct on New Year's Day. Mercury this week goes from step 23 Sagittarius to step 28 Sagittarius. So that means we basically will think through the plot and think through the narrative of what we intend to do. So this is sort of thinking about, okay, what's my goal? What's the story here? Who are the characters? So the mind is really processing this and analyzing what the journey is going to be. You could say you are writing your future story or writing the end chapters of your book. So your mind is thinking about, where does this end? Remember, Sagittarius is an arrow. That's the symbol of the glyph. And so you're really writing, okay, where is this going to head? Mercury will cross the galactic center this week, which is going to magically happen right around the new moon. So that'll be a moment where you will check in officially with the Milky Way and your mind will say, these are my intentions. Basically, the universe does force us to file a flight plan with the universe, and that flight plan is literally the galactic center. So you technically, intellectually file your flight plan with the universe by your mental focus and what you're putting your focus on. This is another reason why if you focus on arguing on Twitter, X, or if you focus on, getting into an argument with someone at the grocery store because you're upset that they, skipped in line in front of you, if you get involved in these arguments of the past, these Age of Pisces conflicts, you're telling the Milky Way, give me another round of power for power's sake. Let me go one more round with fighting power for no reason at all. So really, you opting into enlightenment comes down to your behavior with yourself. If you are blaming anything in the world for your inability to move forward, you're in the old seat of power. The old seat of power, like, please, can I, King George, do something? May I? So it's that place of may I. Now, again, I don't think we should overrun people. I just think that we don't need to ask permission in a free will manifestation vortex matrix. Now, Venus this week goes from step 9 to step 16, Sagittarius. Venus is where we open up, where we accept, where we take things to heart. So you're really going to sort of open up and take to heart the new story inside of you. You're not the same person you used to be. You have changed. And you're going to open up and realize my life is about to change as well. So there's a lot of getting used to the new story, getting used to the new clothing, the new outfit, the new characters, getting used to how it feels and these new beliefs. So you're opening up and accepting these new beliefs. And you're also probably doing a lot of creative filling in of the gaps of the details. So for instance, in the past, you said, yes, and I'm going to drive a white chariot. And now it's like a white chariot with, with bumpers or something. Like, you're going to add detail. You're going to add depth to whatever that story is. So we're sort of filling in the gaps of daily life and what daily life will feel like and what we can open up to in our daily life with Venus. Looking at the schedule of emotions this week, the moon is in Scorpio at the beginning of the week. It is in Scorpio right now as this is broadcasting. So that's really emotionally separating that moon in Scorpio, which happens Saturday and part of Sunday. So over this upcoming weekend, over the upcoming weekend with step 15 and step 16, this is when you're really saying, okay, I'm going to launch. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for what I want to do. I'm going to emotionally let go of the past. I'm going to emotionally embrace the future. This may involve some relationships ending. I keep putting this out there. It's a big theme of this month with Chiron at 15 degrees Aries, that there are some people who are not going to be tall enough to ride this rocket. There are some people who don't want to. There's some people who are obsessed on proving that they're right and the other person is wrong. They want another go around. Their ego just can't let it go. They've got to fight and go on with it. So I am at a point now where I'm just advising all of my clients in personal readings, the line to heaven is single file. We meet our friends and family on the other side. We're at a point now of in Aquarius, it's about the we, but it's about the context of myself in the context of the we. So we must drive our own ship and take our own potential, which means there may be some emotional divorcing going on over this weekend, realizing that so-and-so is just not up for this trip. I'll meet you in heaven. I'll meet you at the end of my life. I'll meet you when I retire. Let me go do this. I'll come back and tell you how it went. So it's quite possible that there are some major breakups or shifts happening. We're also having people coming together where people are tying close knots, getting emotionally closer. A band of brothers, a band of sisters coming together. There's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of collaboration going on right now. 2024 is the year of collaboration, the year of the we. Then the moon moves into Sagittarius on Sunday, Monday, and part of Tuesday. The moon in Sag, you're going to be reviewing. Here's Sag right here. You're going to be reviewing your story. So it's a lot of like, wow, look at how far I've come. Wow, I can't believe this person's not in on it. Wow, isn't that interesting that this person chose to do that? So a lot of emotional storytelling and writing of the new script and really feeling out the part and the role that you're playing. And then the moon moves into Capricorn on Tuesday, begins its rise to the new moon status, which will apex on Thursday, that new moon at step 20. So you sort of emotionally review all of your decisions. So it's like, okay, am I really going to quit school? How do I feel about that? Moon in Capricorn. Am I really going to try to go out there back in the world and try to find the love of my life? How do I feel about that? Moon in Capricorn. So you make a lot of emotional decisions Tuesday, Wednesday, and part of Thursday up until the launch. And then we launch on Thursday with step 20, new moon. Then the moon moves into Aquarius. And it's sort of like, I keep joking with my staff, it's sort of like the song Ground Control to Major Tom. It's like basically this week is the point until he launches. And then it's like, this is Major Tom to ground control. You know what I mean? So it's like that moment. So we're sort of floating emotionally on Thursday and Friday and into Saturday. So it's going to be a very determined week. And then after the new moon, it's going to be sort of spacey and far out, man. Now, looking at our fears in Virgo, Black Moon Lilith goes from 10 to 11 degrees. And it goes to 11 degrees on Wednesday. The significance of 11, Virgo, is it's a grandmaster degree of Virgo. 11 is a master number. So our fears hit the master number. That means that we face any fears around our ability to master ourselves. And mastering yourselves means overcoming your shadow, overcoming your fear and your doubts, standing in your new energy. This is part of the shifting of our inner dimension. So when I said the subplot of the week is shifting your inner dimension, I was speaking somewhat to Black Moon Lilith, moving to 11 on Wednesday, hump day, which is the day before the new moon. So right before we launch our new rocket into the new era, we emotionally sort of do a check on ourselves and face any fears of like, am I in integrity? Am I okay? Am I healthy enough to pull this off? These are rational, expected questions to happen to make sure you are ready for launch. And the answer is, do you feel okay? Do you feel ready? That's the key question. Do I feel ready? If you feel ready, you are ready. If you aren't ready, you'll feel you're not ready. There's no checklist the mind can come up with because you've never made this launch before. So facing fears of integrity with Black Moon Lilith moving to step 11. In the age of Pisces, or the Pisces sign, Saturn this week goes from 3 to 4 degrees Pisces, and that's a very important shift in degrees because it happens actually on Monday. This is the real reason about shifting our inner dimension. It comes from Saturn at step 4. Step 4 is the door to a new dimension. So 4 is always the door. It's always the foundation of a dimension, basically. It's both the beginning and the end. It's paradoxical. But the important thing is that Saturn at 4 Pisces says you can no longer at that point live in the old frequency of who you are. And that might be a frequency of pity, or a frequency of fear, or a frequency of doubt, or a frequency of sadness. And I'm not saying that your pain and what you've gone through is illegitimate. I'm saying at some point it's got to end. And what Saturn is saying is it's got to end on Monday. You're going to find that your life is extremely uncomfortable, and there will be breakdowns, which means breakdowns in health, accidents, car accidents, physical injuries. Basically, if you are meant to launch in this rocket to a new era, and you are still vibrationally in the old era, your body is going to break down from the tension of you trying to go high with you still staying low at the same time. It's literally, a tug of war where you're getting pulled apart. So if there are breakdowns around Monday or Tuesday inside yourself, you're not living in the new frequency. You're still living in the old frequency. And so Saturn at 4 is going to sort of slap you and show you where you are out of line, where you are not in your frequency. And this is nothing to be feared. This is the second time Saturn has been here, really the third time. It went here and then it retrograded back, and now it's going back for the third time. So The hardest fall of 4 degrees has already happened last year when Saturn was in Pisces. But any last remaining splinters of old frequency and old, stodginess and stoic that's still holding on, you will have a rude awakening. And I find the combination of Saturn and number 4 is quite rude. Saturn can be a little vicious at times when empowered with the right frequency. Now, at the same time, Neptune remains at Grandmaster step 25 and actually will stay at step 25 for most of the month. This is miraculous. This is the Grandmaster step of Neptune. So Neptune is the planet of 7 in Pisces, which is the sign of 7, at 25, which is net 7, adds to a 7. So it's a 7, 7, 7. This is the only time in your life, the final time in your life, where there'll be a series of 3 7s. 3 being very important because that is the Holy Trinity. 3, so to have 3 7s, the whole Holy Trinity in 7s, means that literally this is a moment of a spiritual shift. That is the biggest evidence that we're going through a paradigm spiritual timeline shift, is the fact that Neptune is direct at step 25 Pisces. So what it ultimately means is if you shift your inner frequency with Saturn at 4 degrees, you will automatically graduate to the new spiritual timeline with Neptune at 25. Saturn is releasing you from the anchor. Neptune is taking you higher. This is a dynamic. By the way, I've never in my lifetime had this experience. This is the only time in our lifetime that we have this combination of Saturn and Neptune both in Pisces at the same time. It is truly a miraculous moment. Now, in the world of Taurus, Jupiter is direct. Woohoo! Do you feel it? Jupiter direct. Did you feel like some self-confidence come up right before New Year's? Did you feel all of a sudden yourself come online and realize that you're the shift and you're the answer you're looking for? That's Jupiter, which is quite a player. It has sort of a Bee Gees vibration to me. If anyone's born in the 70s, it's got like a Bee Gees vibe. That's how I always think of Jupiter. It's like a disco ball in space. Well, the disco ball is on, my friends, and it is blinking everywhere. Jupiter at 5 means it's now time to believe you're mentally own what you are worth. So God says to you, hey, you're worth something, but if you don't act like it and carry that out, you're missing out on an opportunity. The last time Jupiter was at this degree was 2012, a long time ago. So take advantage. It only happens every 12 years. Take advantage of this self-confidence. And that self-confidence does lead then to Uranus at 19 degrees, which is a net 10, which is the ruling number of Taurus. So the fact that Uranus is at Taurus, it's the same dynamic that we just saw with Saturn and Neptune. If you own your self-worth with Jupiter at step 5 and you are mindful of your self-worth, then your net earning potential goes up. And I talked about this earlier today. In fact, this week we have Mars trine Jupiter. So we're going to feel this boost. And we also have the Sun trine Uranus this week. So we're going to feel a boost. So this week is going to give you an energy dimensional shift. This is also Jupiter at 5 as part of the shifting our inner dimensions. It's time to own what you're worth. It's time to own your value. It's time to take credit for what you're good at. You don't have to take credit for what you're not good at, but you have to take credit for what you are good at, and then raise the bar of what's possible with Uranus and Taurus at 19 degrees. By the way, Uranus stations direct on January 27th. So we spend the entire month raising the potential of what we can earn, of what we can create, and then we are free to start creating that after January 27th. And then the final interesting point, of course, is the Aries consciousness. Chiron this week is direct. It's stationed direct actually on December 26th, the day after Christmas, but it's at 15 degrees. 15 is the relationship degree. This is why I think relationships are officially ending. There's 2 reasons for it. One, the South Node is actually in Libra. So the other side of the South Node, this is the North Node in Aries. The South Node in Libra at 20 is saying, hey, it's time to step away from any relationships that don't apply to the future. So we're being called to let go. If you're not going to be if you're not heading for the same destination, if you're not headed for the same goal, those relationships are being pulled apart. And Chiron at 15 is saying, I've healed, basically done the work and been presented with the opportunity to heal a relationship. In essence, if the relationship doesn't heal between now and Chiron at 15 to 16, I don't think it's going to heal. Not this life. It's been given plenty of opportunities. So Basically, the Aries energy is saying it's time to develop my new self. The North Node at 20 is saying it's time to hold space for who I'm becoming in the future, who I feel I'm becoming. By the way, 20 is the same degree as the new moon in Capricorn at 20 degrees. So it's like this is the sponsoring, holding emotional space for the future. 2 is emotion, 0 is space. So it's the emotional cradle, holding this emotional cradle, sort of like kind of holding the future in your arms, ready to give your future a hug. That's a way to sort of look at it. Energetically, we're hugging our future right now. And so if the relationship is not in that hug, if you don't feel that person in that hug, probably going to fade away, at least for now, at least for this round. And I'm not quite sure how long this round will be. The most it will be is 9. Well, the least it will be is 9 years for the next round. And then 18 years is the biggest round. So you'll either see him again in 9 years or 18 years, or not again in this lifetime. So we are doing a major separation right now with those energies. So time to go forward and time to step away from the relationships that don't vibrate with the same frequency. All right, with that said, let's take a look at some of the planets here. I do like to do a screen share and show you what I am seeing. Let's kind of get in the mind of Sensei. And coming up for Astro Mingle, Mychal A. Bryan. Sorry, Mychal, tripping over your name, man. It's the script. I was like, is that a PR? He's very unique. He's got Y's. He's got some Y's in his name, which I think is cool. He's a great astrologer. I got really deep with him. He's going to talk about all sorts of different aspects of astrology that never come up in this show. Traditional astrology, Uranian astrology. This is going to be a deep dive. So get out your crayon and your pencil, get out your notebook if you want to learn something. Mychal and I could talk for hours. It was a great time. I think this is the first astrologer I've had on the show other than Kristen Ryder, who's also an astrologer on our own team. So looking ahead, the first thing to do is Monday, Mercury squares Neptune. So the key here is Mercury's at step 25, which is a spiritual step, right? Neptune's at step 25. I talked about that, the triple sevens. A square means there must be a reconciliation. It's sort of like two cars coming together at an intersection. Who's going to go first? Who's going to make room for who? You know, the fastest moving planet is the most flexible planet. And so this means that we'll probably have to alter our mind on Monday, January 8th, at 8:24 p.m. Eastern time. So it's later in the night, but we're likely going to have to kind of shift our mind and make sure that our story, Sagittarius, and our thoughts are on the same page as our spiritual destiny. So if you have not been necessarily on the path of your spiritual destiny, there will be a course correction Monday night or maybe Tuesday morning. Sometimes there's a fallout. Considering it's a Neptune aspect, you might get that message in a dream. Notice Saturn has already moved to 4. So you're going to be knocked down if you're in the wrong dimension inside yourself. The sun is at 18 degrees, which is a net 9. That means it's time to act and move forward and take your plans forward. So we've initiated the launch sequence basically at step 18. And the way I joke with my staff was like, it's like we've initiated the launch sequence and this is us praying to God, like, oh God, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope. The next key date is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. This is the chart of Mars sextiling Saturn. So when we talk about shifting our inner dimension, this is one of the aspects that brought us that title. Mars at 4 says it's now time to enforce the new inner dimension in your own self-governance, the way you govern yourself on the inside, the way you discipline yourself on the inside. This will be amplified by the fact that the moon will cross Mars. So there'll be some anger, potential breakdown. Incidentally, Tuesday, 9:39 p.m., it's building up all day. Tuesday is a big accident-prone day. Okay, so be very careful. A lot of times God will slap your butt down and you'll, trip down the stairs, break an ankle or something. I'm not wishing for that. I'm just saying that stuff happens when you stay stoic and refuse to alter your frequency, and emotions cross Mars, which is then at the same time sextiling Saturn at 4. That's a lot of gravity telling you get with the program already. Plus the rocket ship is already about to launch at 19 degrees. You're out of time. So Tuesday is a bit of a hazard day for those who are lingering and refusing to grow. Later on Tuesday, actually, I got these backwards. This goes here. Well, we'll just leave it the way it is. But actually, the sun trines Uranus before that happens. I meant to do that and I forgot. But the sun trines Uranus actually prior to that. So 2 hours before that moment, that I was talking to you, the sun actually trines Uranus at 19 degrees. See 19? So remember, Uranus station's direct at 27. This is where you basically shoot for the moon. So, basically what the universe is saying is shoot for the moon, but make sure your vibe is in order. That's what Tuesday is saying. Shoot for the moon, but make sure your vibe is in order. And this is probably an upgrade. If you were in the right frequency with yourself, you likely, you may not have been giving yourself the credit or aiming high enough. For some, they may have been aiming too high and too close to the sun and need to come down, Icarus kind of thing. But for the most part, people watching this show probably haven't given themselves enough credit, but you on Tuesday will give yourself that credit boost. Then on Wednesday, January 10th, the sun squares the north node. This is a major turning point. Remember, I told you the north node is at 20, just like the sun. This is prior to the full moon, I believe. Actually, maybe not. Let's see. With the new moon apex is 6. Yeah, actually, I have these backwards. Silly me. So the new moon actually happens first. Let's do this in chronological order. 6:57 a.m. and 8:43 p.m. So in chronological order, first early in the morning, we have the new moon in Capricorn apexes, and that ultimately is the launch. So that launch happens. Now that launch means that you wake up on Thursday. All right. This is on Thursday. You wake up on Thursday feeling like you're ready to rock it. It's going to be a very sensitive day. One thing I want to point out is the fact that because the sun and moon are within 9-degree orbs of Pluto, you could feel danger, Will Robinson. You might feel, that what you're about to do is going to rattle some cages. As I mentioned earlier, Mercury is on the galactic center at the time of the new moon apex. Is that normal, Sensei? No. Okay. So that is a phenomenal moment. That tells you that this is destined. This is what you plan to do all along. And it's time to launch energetically. Now, as I mentioned, later, the sun squares the north node later that night. And that means that now that you have launched, am I getting this right? 8:43 p.m. Oh, you know what? I have this wrong. Excuse me. I'm just going to correct myself right here on the air. I have the days wrong. That's what the problem is. Sometimes I'm in a live moment. I just get caught up in the fury. So let's do this correct so we don't mislead our people. On Wednesday, before we launch, the sun squares the north node. So it's the opposite. It's that you say, okay, I'm ready to alter who I'm becoming in the world. That's Wednesday. That's going to bed on Wednesday. So Wednesday night, you're going to bed and you're saying, all right, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to become an astronaut. I'm going to become something big. The north node at 20 is what I am going to become. This is the capital I that's in the we, the I version of the we. So on Wednesday night, you say, this is what I'm going to do. Thursday morning, you launch. Sorry about that. Thursday morning, you launch. And at that launch, Mercury's on the galactic center. So Thursday morning is when things really take off. And you have that sort of last moment Wednesday night with the sun squaring north node. You have that last moment of like, is this the I want to be? Is this who I want to be? All right. Then on Thursday, let's see here. Following the blast off, at 9:36 a.m. So a couple hours after the apex, we have Venus then trine Chiron. So Venus at 15 degrees Sag trines Chiron. And this is after the launch. And I kind of get the feeling of this is when you're sort of waving out the window goodbye to the relationships that are not going to be in your life. So there's like a sad moment where you realize not everyone can come with you. And this is a grandmaster step of Venus, by the way. It adds to a 6. So it ultimately is, your story is changing and is healed. Now, this might be relationships coming back together, by the way. That is very possible. It could be like Donnie and Marie coming back together. Like you could come back together after having been apart for a long time. So I don't want to paint just a bleak breakup, but I do think there'll be more breakups than anything. Then on Friday next week, we have Mars trine Jupiter. And the thing here is this is where Mars at 5 will trine Jupiter at 5 Taurus. This is ultimately when you realize, okay, if I'm worth more, I've got to act like it. So come Thursday, you go shopping, act like it. You're worth more now, so act like it. So the moon is now in Aquarius. We're now launching. It's ground control to Major Tom. We're floating into space. And then I'm going to give one extra day here on the 13th, which is Saturday, technically part of next week's show. But then Mercury will ingress into Capricorn. And now all of your thoughts are not on the big picture of the story. It's all on the practical of pulling this off. So you can see quite an amazing launch week. One other thing, the moon will cross over Saturn next Saturday, the 13th. That's actually the day of my Countdown 2024 webinar, by the way. The moon will cross Saturn on that day later that night. Actually, looks like 9:49 p.m. But that does mean that there's going to be another emotional jolt of shifting our inner dimensions. Okay, brilliantly so. All right. That is the charts for the day. Now I think it's time to talk about how this involves you. Go steep yourself some tea, my friend. Let's have our weekly tea time. Welcome to our Tea Time Horoscopes. This is where I always like to dive deep and help all of our viewers personally with their life and what's happening energetically. We do a full horoscope for all 12 signs, and we talk about some of the specifics that are important to you and what is important in your life. This week, I'm going to talk about really 4 major transits and give you some ideas of what it is. For one, I'm going to talk about the new moon. So for all 12 signs, I'll talk about where you are setting the emotional cradle for the future. So where is that blast off? Now, I say this every week, but it's worth saying. In essence, the blast off comes down to the fact that if you blast off where I talk about in this episode, then the rest of your life will follow suit. And I do believe that you should listen to your sun sign and your rising sign in these soul horoscopes, these tea time horoscopes, but apply your sun sign first. It's very important you apply your sun sign first. So in each of the 12 signs, I'll talk about where you are setting an emotional cradle for the future, where you are blasting off, where you're moving forward with your power, and to implement that first before anything else. Then I'm going to talk about, remember I said the sun will trine Uranus, and when that sun trines Uranus, it's going to be setting the stage. It'll be on Tuesday where you can take your self-worth or your earning potential higher. So I'll talk about for each 12 signs how that blast off ties into raising your earning potential or raising your manifest potential somewhere in your life, and focus on that part of your life first, and then the rest of your life will snap into play as well. Then I'll talk about the affirmation of our life purpose, which actually happens. And I don't think did I talk about this in full? I did. It's at the beginning of the week on January 8th, Mercury will square Neptune. And that's sort of the, oh God, am I about to do this? I told you about that, right? Like you're kind of praying on the launch pad. I'm going to talk about the 2 areas of life, and that apex is Monday, but it follows through the whole launch as far as the orb is concerned. I'm going to talk about how you're going to affirm your life purpose with Mercury in Sagittarius, and how that squares to Neptune and what that means in the square. So what are you having to reconcile? What 2 sides are you reconciling? The Mercury in Sagittarius is the earth story. Neptune in Pisces is the spiritual story. And so we are reconciling that square. That's what a square is a reconciliation between 2 energies, and also how we manifest. That's the cross. The cross is manifestation. The plus sign is the sign for earth, for instance, the glyph for earth. And anytime you have a squared energy, that's part of how the universe creates consciousness in a Metatron's cube sort of way. So for each of the 12 signs, those will be the points. I'll be liquidating here in between, because after 90 minutes, my voice starts to go. And let's start with the Aries. Aries, you've been working a long time to make a lot of changes. Pluto's been in Capricorn for 15 years. And God Universe is saying you have fought all the things you had to fight. It's now time to go for it when it comes to your career and leadership potential. That means go for it as a parent, go for it as a CEO, go for it in the C-suite, go for it. Go for your dreams, launch that candle, make it happen, and don't look back. It's time for Arises to once again lead the pack. You did fall behind as part of what you had to do to find your strength, but now you're ready to race ahead again. And watch out, world. Arises will be on the front line of the new era. They're always first to the party, and they usually buckle out a little early or quit. So it's time to launch that rocket with career and legacy. Now, This trines into Uranus in the house of investments and productivity. So you want to make sure that this rocket launch turns into money, turns into income. If it's not directly tied to income, I don't know if it's the right thing for you. You want to make money right away, or at least be on entry level. So if you're like the first person to buy Bitcoin or the first person to buy something that in the future, okay, that's cool, but don't make it a super long-term investment. We want to be able to have this pay off within 1 year. Okay. If it can't pay off within 1 year, I think you're making a mistake. You're shooting a little too far. Come down and focus a little bit more on the ground. But it is time for a career legacy change that directly leads to more money. Now, in the concept of your story, you are, for lack of a better term, rewriting your life's purpose. This might be the 5th or 6th draft. It's okay that it's taken this many drafts, by the way. Now this is the one you can count on. So it is time to intuit and make sure, yes, I was born to fill in the blank. So yes, I was born to fill in the blank, but this has to coincide with Neptune in your relationship to God. You can't, it's funny. Aries in the past have always been able to ignore God. I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying you do. Okay. You have the ability. You're the one sign that can go pure ego and just go over the wall and attack and like bust through it and not necessarily pay attention to spirit or karma or spiritual consequence. But now you're being told you must consider your spiritual consequence. You must consider your spiritual multi-lifetime perspective, your faith, your spiritual values. They must be reconciled with this life purpose. It cannot just be an idea. It has to be an idea that's backed up by faith. All right, moving on. Taurus. Tauruses now are they are launching their new updated life purpose. And it's funny, I have to say, as a Taurus, I've always known my life purpose. However, it has changed dramatically in the last 15 years. And I think Tauruses have been wanting to, come on, let's do it already. Let's do it already. You've wanted to get on your life purpose. You want to make the dent in the world. You want to do something profound. And yet something has always held you back. It was Pluto, baby. And now Pluto is leaving your sign for the rest of your life. It will dip in September, but we'll talk about that then. But it's just a dip. It's just a final dip. So it's time to go for it. It is all steam ahead. Open up those gates to the bullpen and let those bulls come charging out. Go after what you were born to do. The earth needs you right now. So this is a launch of Taurus's life purpose. Not everything at once, but definitely everything you want. Now, this must be tied to an innovation of your character. So if you're going to be the same woman or the same guy that you were in this new life purpose, that's not going to fly. You can't be the same person you've been. You've got to innovate your character. You got to refine yourself. This is the great Gatsby Taurus. This is the Taurus who's going to kind of show the world. This is what my friend calls the white bull. It's not necessarily a brown spotted bull. This is the clean white bull that doesn't get dirty. So it's time now to upgrade your behavior, your responses, your character, your action plan. You also have to upgrade how you do it. The way you do it now is not good enough for this purpose. And that's the trine to Uranus. Now, Mercury affirming life purpose says you will have to change your stripes, Taurus. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. There is a full-on wardrobe change, comfort zone change, landscape change, relationship changes. I mean, not all of the above, but enough for you to feel uncomfortable and vulnerable for a while. You're going to have to make a lot of changes. Some people are going to be surprised that there's a new bull in town and you're not dealing with any more bull. And you used to deal with the bull and now you won't. So, Tauruses will take as many arrows to the side till finally their nostrils will inflame and they'll charge, right? That's where the moment is right now. Tauruses are ready to charge. But that has to be reconciled, these changes, with what your social ambition is. The change has to be in alignment with the way you want to be perceived in the world, the effect you want to have on the world, the impression you want to make, the relationship you want to have. So if the change is going to make you not aligned with your world or your brand or your campaign, it's not the right change. So temper the changes with world reputation and social ambition goals. All right. Moving on. Geminis. Gemini, it's time to launch a life transformation. So much like Taurus, I just spoke to, Geminis are going to change a lot of things. You have been reluctant to change. I know a lot of Geminis. Every time I say, why don't you do this? You give me 5 reasons why you can't. Okay. Or you won't, or you're not ready, or blah, 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 blah. That's over now. If you're not willing to change and get a little wet and get in the pool and get uncomfortable and mix up your comfort zones, you're going to be left behind, frankly. You're going to be left behind and you're not going to be a part of the new era. I got to tell you like it is. That's why you watch me, Gemini. I'm going to be very honest. This isn't cruel. This is the way the world works. You must now change. You're out of time. All right. And when I say change, I mean by January 20th. And the thing is you've built up so much resistance to not changing that it's going to happen real quick. Like just think of it pulling off a Band-Aid, make it quick. All right. But it's time to change. Now that means changing what you tolerate, changing your timing of things, changing what you'll open up to, what you won't open up to, change what you'll invest in versus what you won't invest in. These are major changes. These are lifelong changes. These are changes in how you live, how you breathe, how you do everything. And specifically changes in personal intimacy. That's a big part of it as well. Now, these changes tie into karma, spirituality, and faith. If you're not ending karmic cycles, you're making the wrong change. So if you have a karmic cycle of always being left behind because you gave your love to someone who doesn't deserve it, you have to change to reflect that wisdom. You have to reflect the wisdom of your understanding of what you've learned spiritually in those changes. If you don't reflect your spiritual wisdom, what you've learned since 2018, when Uranus went into Taurus, then these changes are going to not serve you in the way they possibly could. So, bring God in on this, bring your intuition on this. Geminis are logical, but the other brain is intuitive. You're both. So listen to that intuitive voice. Make sure your intuitive voice is as equally represented in your boundary changes as your logical mind. It cannot just be your logic. It has to be logic and intuition, both. Now, Mercury in Sagittarius does say that it's time to move forward with your plans for partnership changes. That could be a business partnership, starting a band with your buddies or your girlfriends, like, starting a dance troupe, whatever. You are partnering now. It's time to partner. Partnership. You're a Gemini. Okay. Gemini's all about the twins. Geminis don't do many things alone. They always have someone with them, someone right on the hip. They always have a partner. That's the whole point of being a Gemini, is that you get to actually hang out with someone the whole lifetime. It's not a lifetime of being alone. And even when you're alone, you got 2 spheres in your brain that are always talking back and forth as well. So it is about partnership, your new story. It is about some sort of alliance. But with that square to Neptune, the partnership has to be supportive of your career. If your partnership is keeping you from working, if your partnerships are keeping you from your destiny, keeping you from making your mark on the world, it's the wrong partnership, or it has to be renegotiated. You will find that if you don't, you must move forward in your social ambitions for career and legacy. Saturn's going to bite you in the butt in about 2 years if you don't. This is the time right now to get partnerships in alignment with long-term career goals. All right? Take a drink. Cancers. Oh, this is a good one. Cancers. It is now time to launch the new marriage and partnership approach. So Cancer's been working on this for 15 years on long-term partnerships. Cancers were born kind of old school when it comes to relationships and partnerships. Old school in the sense of, either I got to take care of the little lady, or the big man's going to take care of me. Daddy's going to take care of me. Kind of old classical 1950s kind of architecture of business relationships for the most part. And now Cancers are blasting out of that partnership marriage protocol. So it's time to transform how you partner. What are the conditions? What are the rules? What are the promises? There should be no sacrifice. Okay. I don't believe in sacrifice. If you're sacrificing, you're doing something wrong. Win-win is always a possibility. So if there's a sacrifice, no, you're not choosing correctly. You're not choosing with your heart. When we do sacrifice, our heart has no problem with it. Like if there is a sacrifice, it doesn't feel like one when there's love involved. So Cancers are now launching new partnerships in marriage. This is the new rules. Remember, Capricorn are the rules, the decisions, the laws. So these are the new laws of marriage and partnership. And by the way, it's not just romantic marriage. It's business partnership. It's strategic alliance. It's tennis team. It's, rock and roll band, however you want to look at partnership and alliance. Now, this partnership and alliance must be aligned with your social ambitions. Kind of like Geminis, you can't marry someone that doesn't support you in your career. You can't marry someone that is not cool with you on Instagram all day. You can't marry someone or be in a partnership who doesn't support you in your volunteerism out there in the world. So you cannot compromise your social ambition or reputation for a partner that you're with. And that includes a partner that tarnishes that reputation. If someone embarrasses you, that's a no-no. It cannot happen anymore. It's time for you to be in power couple relationships. And that means that you are aligned in public and you are aligned behind closed doors as well. Now, Mercury in Sag is saying it is time to build a new narrative about how life will be, a new lifestyle, a new way of living, a new way of working, a new way of, work balance relationship to the home. It's a whole new lifestyle that you are moving forward with. And that's part of your story, a new way of life. But that is squaring life purpose. That new way of life must be aligned with what you are here to do. So this is a time where, I'll just wait tables and then I'll eventually get to teach when I want to teach. Nope, not anymore. The universe is saying, no, you can't do that anymore. Your lifestyle has to be, you can wait tables at the university because you intend to teach, okay? But you cannot be on separate pages between what you do and what you want your life to become or what your purpose is. Not necessarily career, but purpose. So, the job can, the daily lifestyle can be teaching you, but not maybe directly paying you. So aligning lifestyle with life purpose for the Cancers. Leos, it's now time to launch the lifestyle and the performance you were meant to do. So Leos have done all the training they need to. You know what's a healthy lifestyle, what's not a healthy lifestyle. You know what you can perform good at. You know what you stink at. Okay. So it's now time to launch what you're good at. It's time to launch the successful lifestyle. There's a saying from a friend of mine who's a Sagittarius: success is a lifestyle. It's not a goal. It's a lifestyle. So it's time to launch the success lifestyle. This is how you wake up. This is how you eat. This is when you go to bed. And this is very much about boundaries because Pluto is there. When to stop, when to not go too far, when to keep going when you're shortcutting something. So launch the lifestyle that will bring you the success. Launch the lifestyle that will allow you to perform like the shining star you really are. Now, this lifestyle must be in complete concert with career and leadership ambition. It has to be in concert with what you intend to perform, the legacy you tend to leave behind. You cannot have a lifestyle that's not completely aligned with what your career and leadership goals are. So again, Leos and Leo risings are being told it's time to build the lifestyle for your successful career. And trust me, you don't want to mess this up, Leo, because Jupiter will not be back in Taurus for 12 years. You've never been in a place more than this one for you to launch into your potential right now. So if you miss this boat, don't write me. Okay. I was helping you at the moment. Now, Mercury in Sag, also another fascinating thing. Not only are you being encouraged to create the successful lifestyle and the successful career, but you're being pursued to follow your personal dreams. What is the wish upon the star that you make, Leo? It is time now to follow that personal wish. However, that squares Neptune, which means your boundaries and the appropriate spiritual boundaries must be in play. So you can have your dreams come true, but don't cross a line. Don't trespass. Don't allow someone to trespass. And these spiritual boundaries are based on your karma and your experience. If you have a past life or a past experience of where you cross boundaries with alcohol, let's say, or cross boundaries with sexual connections, or cross boundaries, with having too much or too little of something, you're at a point now where your dreams will not happen unless you own the spiritual integrity of those boundaries and live true to those boundaries. So it's time to be a king or queen and step up and do it now, Leo. Virgos, I got good news for you. It's time to launch your personal dreams and creative genius. It is time. And you are a creative genius. You just try to create too much. That's usually the issue. Too many things going on, too much. So part of the Capricorn is choose the one you love the most. And I've had Virgos go, I don't know the one I love the most. And my response is, then you don't know your heart very well. Because at the end of the day, if you were in heaven and God said you can only have one, you'd eventually pick one. Okay. It might be a hair of like a fraction of a tiny little microscopic little bull, but at the end of the day, you do have a favorite. So I recommend you choose your favorites first and you launch that castle or launch that rocket is what I mean to say. So launch that rocket for personal dreams and creative genius. If you got some creative genius idea that you've been toying around with, it's time. The universe is saying it's time. However, it must be in coincide with your wisdom and your experience and your education. And it must be a personal dream that's going to challenge you to learn more. So if you aren't going to learn more from it, it's the wrong thing to do because you are destined to learn more. And that gives you permission. You don't have to know it all right now to do it. You just have to launch it because Uranus and Taurus is going to help you learn more and go farther than you've ever gone before. So if it's something you could always do in your sleep and you're just like filing your nails and bored, that's not the personal dream you're meant to do. You're meant to do the personal dream that challenges you, that brings wisdom, that brings experience, that brings mastery. Now, Mercury in Sagittarius is focused on home, family, and foundation. It is time to come to a peaceful resolution with your home, your feelings, a peaceful resolution with your relationship to your mother. So it's time to have a new peace at home. It's time to be grounded. It's time to find the story of where you want to maybe retire, depending on your age, or where you want to have kids, or where you want to set up shop for what you're doing with personal dreams. However, whatever you do with home and family, you've got to keep space open for long-term partnership. Virgos are destined for long-term partnership. If you're in one, it's going to go to a higher degree. If you're not in one, you're going to be offered one, in my opinion. So don't create a home and family that doesn't have room for another person. Make sure there's room in that closet. Make sure there's room in your life for that person. And make sure that you are creating a home from the wisdom of what you've learned the last time you lived with someone or the last time you're in a partnership. So it must include the spiritual wisdom of what partnership can be, not what it has been. Excuse me, getting passionate there. Plus, because I think I'm talking to Virgo, my stomach's all, yeah. So Virgos, it's time to launch the creative dream. And by the way, when you put this all together, if your dream, your personal dream is to find the love of your life, you're getting a green light right now from this astrologer. Go for it. All right. Libras. Libras, you are building a foundation. Launch the rocket of a new emotional foundation. So emotional foundation is home, family, the homestead, homeland security, white picket fence, 2.2 car garage, that whole bit. But it's also the emotional foundation of money in the bank, not going to sweat it, got a backup plan, got insurance on the house. So emotional foundation is to ground yourself. It's time to do whatever is necessary to ground yourself. A Libra scale has what we call a fulcrum in the center. And basically, you're being called to build that fulcrum in the center, to build that place that the teeter-totter tots. So it's time to build that foundation of the fulcrum, the foundation that everything balances itself on in your life. Now, you have to keep into consideration that your life has to change. It can't be the life you have. Your life is going to change. This has to be a mobile home. This has to be a home that can go with the flow of the changes necessary. This has to be a foundation that allows you to transform your life. So although you're grounding in one home, it's so that you can change the rest of your life. And that means intimacy, transformation, opening up to things that you've never done before, that sort of thing. That's Uranus in Taurus. Now, Mercury in Sag says that your mind is having some big ideas now, some big attitude, big ideas, big plans, big things you want to do, lots of new ideas, maybe new conversations, maybe new connections. Maybe you're onto AI or you're onto something really fascinating and compelling. However, Mercury squaring Neptune says, whatever that is, it's got to be grounded with your lifestyle. You can't lose your life over it. You can't fall out of balance in life over it. Your lifestyle has to be in concert with these ideas. It's not a burn and run, let it all behind because I have this great idea. The ideas have to mesh with life, lifestyle, work-life balance, what you have learned about life, what you've learned about your health, what you've learned about what you need from your health. So Follow those big ideas, but make sure it is in concert with your lifestyle, a healthy lifestyle. All right. Scorpios. Scorpios, it's now time to launch the big ideas. So you have some big ideas for the planet. It's time to step into your brilliance. You've removed all of the negative thinking that might be in the way of your big ideas. These big ideas can be inventions, creations, songs, computer programs, books, narratives, films, anything that you think under the sun, analysis, smart, intelligent stuff, smart buildings, whatever. It's time now to launch those the new attitude and the new grand ideas. The world is hurting. We need your good ideas, Scorpio. It's time to launch. However, it must be in alignment with all sorts of relationships. So these ideas have to work with your relationships, and realize when it comes to relationships, you've got another few years of growth yet. You have not mastered relationships. You're just now at the point of making them non-toxic and get along. So if you're in a relationship, it's going to go deeper, higher, more romantic, more close. If you're not in a relationship, you're going to draw one into your life, but your big ideas must be in alignment with your relationship intentions and what you intend to do. Now, Mercury in Sag says your mind has some ideas also for money, abundance, business. So some of those big ideas probably tie directly into money. However, with Mercury scoring Neptune, they must also be in concert with your own personal dreams. You cannot do money for money's sake anymore. You must satisfy the heart. You must be creative. It must be something that lights up your heart, makes you excited, keeps you up at night. So it cannot just be money for money's sake. That day is over. That's like power for power's sake. That day is over. So make sure that it is something your heart lights up about. And if your heart lights up, that is your money maker, Scorpio. Go for it, launch those big ideas, and make it happen. I'll take a little sip here. All right. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, it's now time to launch your plan for abundance or passive income or both. So Sagittarius, it's time to invest in yourself, to go for that big money dream, to go for that product we've never seen before, to invent that thing we've never seen, to create that service, to basically create money that makes money in your sleep. It's time to create a chain reaction of making money. Now, I think the reason why Sagittarius sometimes don't make money is because they don't prioritize money. They're all about value and belief and passion and purpose. So money is usually a last thing for Sagittarius. And quite often when Sagittarius 10 years ago, we're often broke, frankly. They're always the one borrowing and paying you back Tuesday. That day is over. It's now time to launch your plans for abundance and passive income. However, it must also be a money maker that ties into your daily routines, your vocation, and your performance. It must be an investment that is in concert with you getting better over time. So you don't have to be perfect out of the gate, but it does have to line up with a balanced life. It can't throw your life off balance. It can't make you sick. It can't make you sacrifice stuff like sleep or food. It has to be some sort of abundance plan that's in alignment with your life getting higher and higher in quality every year for the next 6 or 7 years. All right. With a huge change in lifestyle coming this year. I talk about that in Countdown 2024. Now, Mercury's in your sign, which means you're about ready to launch a new character or action plan, that you are literally ready to play a new role in life and a new role that you've maybe never played before. And this is destined. You were meant to do this. Yes, indeed. However, that energy squares Neptune, which means that this new character has to be in alignment with your home, your family, your children, your parents. If you're taking care of them, you have to make sure that what your ego wants doesn't disrupt your emotional security and your emotional foundation. So, Sagittarius are being given the green light to make the money, but not disrupt the lifestyle. The green light to live the dream of who their characters always wanted to be, but also consider home and family and foundation. And it's funny, this just came to me. But I'm going blank here, so I guess I'm not supposed to say it. So I'm being told not to say it. But I think we're going to see some Sagittariuses who are famous start having kids. I'm just going to put that out there. Okay. You know who I'm talking about most likely. But it is time to go out there and live your dream and who you are, but at the same time, consider home, family, and permanence as well. Capricorns. Capricorns are now being told to launch the new character, to launch the master action plan. So if you have a master plan that you want to pull off, for instance, Jeff Bezos is a Capricorn, and he's literally launching rockets in his personal, space adventure. So he's sort of a good example of kind of where Capricorns are going. He's really a good example. He's a grandmaster Capricorn, by the way, but he was all about money and just making money. Now he's shooting for the stars. That's the same thing. That's the best metaphor for Capricorns there is. It's time to shoot for the stars. It's time to shoot for what your character's always wanted. It's time to be that cowboy. It's time to be that hero. It's time to be that personality that you've always wanted to be. This is the time. You've done all the work to eliminate the old ego triggers. However, it must involve love and creativity. You must love it. It must inspire your creativity. It must inspire what your heart hopes and dreams for. It's got to be something that lights up your inner child. So it has to be characterization and action plan that is part of a personal dream, something that your heart truly wants and has always wished for. And realize those dreams are just starting to break now. They're going to continue to grow in intensity for the next couple of years and grow really fast this year. Now, Mercury in Sag means that you are now getting your mind around a new picture of what faith is. Maybe a new relationship to God, maybe thinking about the afterlife, maybe someone's passed away in your life, and now that makes you think about where are they? Are they still there? Does consciousness move on? You have new ideas about your place in the universe, and you have new ideas about your relationship to God, and you are being encouraged to go along that path. That's part of your new story. Part of Capricorn's new story is a new faith. However, it has to be reconciled with your ideas, with your plans, with your strategy. You've got to bring that faith and that spiritual idea, those spiritual concepts into your daily thinking, into your plans, into your strategy. So incorporating spiritual intention into the big picture strategy that you have for your life. But go for it. I think we're about to see a whole new version of Capricorns now. You've been working really hard for 15 years. It's time for you to cash in on all that work. All right. My voice needs a little more sip. Aquarius. Aquariuses are now launching a new relationship to God and a new relationship to faith. Aquariuses now have an established relationship to what the afterlife is. That afterlife may be a map you have of consciousness, an area of consciousness you intend to explore, a simpatico relationship you have with God universe. Maybe you've built up the ability to be a psychic and a reader and downloads amazing information, and now you're confident. Whatever it is, it's time to take your relationship to God to market. It's time to take your relationship to God into something practical and something that will pay off. Now, that relationship must be grounded in your emotional security. The trine to Uranus is you can't just leave the body and detach from your feelings or your home or your foundation or the basics of life. You've got to build a strong rocket launch pad, okay? So you can go for the stars and God and consciousness and other dimensions and extra dimensionals, but you got to also stay grounded right here on Earth with family, with food, with routines, with self-care. So there's got to be a strong self-care part of the story here. Now, Mercury in Sag says that you have a new social ambition, that you're clear on this social ambition. You know it's time to make a mark in the world. The age of Aquarius can't happen without Aquariuses. So there's this call to this ambition, and that ambition is important, and that's very important that you go on that path, and what you're thinking is correct. You'll make a few more little notes, and it's off to the races. So you have the right plan. You're on the mark. However, you must make sure that that mission makes money. So I think part of the reason why the age of Aquarius will happen is because a bunch of Aquariuses are going to make a lot of money doing these new age things. And otherwise, they might call you crazy. But once they see you've made a lot of money, and it's not about the money, and that's been the whole issue. It's not about the money. That's why there's not a lot of rich Aquariuses that I can think of off the top of my head. You haven't been in it for the money. But the greedy part of the world is not going to follow you unless you appeal to those base desires. And also, you deserve it. It's time for you to be comfortable. It's time for you to be material. This is a world of abundance. That was the whole point of heaven coming to earth, was that you can have it in physical reality. So your plans are fine as long as you ground that spiritual shift and as long as you are making money with what you're going for in society, and you will be a leader in the new era. And then lastly, the Pisces. Pisces, it is now time to launch your social ambition. It's time to shoot for the stars, Pisces. It's time to jump out of the fishbowl and into an aquarium or even maybe an ocean. It's time to get out there and really swim. The world is looking for Pisces to lead us out of the age of Pisces. So we can't graduate the age of Pisces unless Pisces show us they graduated. It's time for you to be a model Pisces. It's time for you to model what Pisces can do. It's time for you to show the world what you've been doing privately and secretly your whole life. So it's time to go out there and make your mark, Pisces. This is the launch. You might have felt like you've been held back for 15 years. You were. It's called Pluto. It was holding you back, but Pluto's taking off those chains on January 20th, and it'll be time to launch. Now, you must tie into this your great ideas. So your ideas and communication have to be tied into your social launch. You can't do it quietly. You got to share with the world what you're doing. You got to communicate, create curriculum, create channels, create social networks, whatever. But your ideas, your communication must be included in this social launch. Mercury in Sag says, you've got a lot of great ideas for your career right now. You got some ideas for being a leader, maybe ideas for being a parent, maybe ideas for creating a legacy that you never thought you would create. This is great. However, this legacy must be in full concert with who you really are. Your character, your actions, your behavior, they have to be in complete alignment with what your career goals are. No more can the Pisces swim in both ways, where it's like, do as I say, but don't do as I do. That's gone. That Pisces is going to sink to the bottom of the fish tank. You have to make sure that your character, your actions are in complete congruency with your career goals, your ambitions, and as I mentioned, your social ambition has to be in concert with your ideas and communication. Do that, and you will be a leader in the wrap-up of the age of Pisces. All right, friends, that wraps up our zodiac soul horoscope for this day. We are going to come back. We're going to do a small little break here. And when I come back, I'm going to interview with Bryan. We're going to have a fabulous conversation about astrology. Stay tuned. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. This zodiac weather is from Saturday, January 6th to Friday, January 12th, 2024. Looking ahead at your weekend forecast, it's going to be really smooth and easygoing as we accept the new potential for managing our life. Let's drill down. On Saturn Day, it's sunny and profound. Step 15 means Venus rules the day, so it's a creative, resting, and receiving day. You are accepting a new daily directive in your life. And with the sun squaring Chiron, you're probably also coming to some amends with a relationship. The moon in Scorpio makes all boundaries rather clean. On Sunday, it's cloudy and focused. Step 16 means Neptune rules the day, so you are tuning in to your spirit for affirmation. But because the sun is in Capricorn, this spiritual guidance is rather sharp, and today you are preparing for takeoff as the moon shifts into Sagittarius and you start to replay the story you tell yourself. Moving ahead to the 5-day weekday moodcast, over the course of this upcoming week, you are initiating a countdown sequence and shifting your inner dimension. On Monday, it's sunny and encouraging. Step 17 means it's a Grandmaster Capricorn day. You are making Grandmaster commitments for 2024, and Mercury squaring Neptune, you're also squaring off with your destiny. Also, it's Love Fest Day. Tell everyone you love that you love them. On Tuesday, it's sunny and expectant. Step 18 means this is a Mars-ruled day. You may be a little impatient, and the moon is shifting into Capricorn for a countdown to the new moon. On this day, you are putting your commitments into action, and there's a lot of karma unfolding as the sun trines Uranus, upping the game of your potential, and Mars sextiles Saturn, calling you on believing in yourself. On Wednesday, it's sunny and super motivated. Step 19 means Earth rules the day, so this is the day where you're holding loving space to manifest the new direction. You will feel yourself moving to the next level. And with the sun squaring the nodes, your heart is also reconciling with a new character on the horizon. On Thursday, it's cloudy and capable. It's also the new moon in Capricorn. The moon in Capricorn and the sun will come together at step 20, meaning the moon is ruling this new moon. And Venus is trining Chiron, which means you are correlating your story with relationship healing. And then on Friday, it's sunny and bold. Step 21 means Jupiter rules the day. This is the aftermath of the new moon, and now you are feeling free to expand into new control methods. You're basically acting now on your inner credit. Mars is trining Jupiter, which means you are also feeling your self-worth. And with the moon now in Aquarius, you might be feeling a little galactic.
It's serious joy, joy, joy.
Astrology guidance, you can enjoy an entire month of personalized astrology services for just $3.99. At Serious Joy, we pride ourselves on providing astrology enthusiasts with exactly what they're looking for: daily personalized inspiration that speaks directly to the heart. Sign up today and you'll receive personalized messages straight to your phone 7 days a week. And that's just half of it. You'll also get access to our exclusive members-only site with tons of amazing features. Experience the most accurate astrology service on the web at seriousjoy.com.
Hello and welcome to Astro Mingle, the spiritual podcast that mingles with the talented light workers and innovative influencers of our time. Being an astrologer myself, I'm always captivated by the opinions of other astrologers, especially ones that take on a very unique knowledge base or point of view. And tonight's guest is one of those special astrologers. Mychal A. Bryan is a Bahamian-Jamaican astrologer, journalist, author, and clinical hypnotherapist, specializing in hypnotic dream work. In May 2023, he just recently published Mastering Traditional Astrology, A Depth of Beginning in the Celestial Art. He's the founder of the Oraculos School of Astrology, also known as OSA, where he offers rigorous training programs in concrete, event-based astrology. He practices Renaissance and Uranian astrology in his client work, focusing largely on predictive and medical astrology research. An avid student of Western mystery and tradition, he's entrenched in the world of Jewish mysticism, Hermeticism, alchemy, geomancy, and the Kabbalistic tarot. Mychal describes himself as an open book, but in reality, he's an open library of information. Please send waves of love and light to welcome today's guest, Taurus, traditional and Uranian astrologer, Mychal A. Bryan. Welcome, Mychal.
Hey, Christopher, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. It's nice to meet a Mychal. I'm a Christopher. We're sort of biblical in our names and
Yeah.
astrological. Thanks for making this journey today. I appreciate it. I've been actually watching you for a while. I'm not even sure how I started following you, to be honest. Like you just started popping on my feed. I've been watching you really promoting yourself this year. I've been watching your book come out. I watch you not unhappy with the colors on the book cover for a couple posts there. You were like ready to send it back to Amazon. So I was like, I've been feeling with you. I've been growing with you because I'm not published myself yet. So congratulations on that, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I've been watching you as well. I mean, been aware of your work for quite some time now. And I think that when I made the decision to switch over to doing more self-promo on my podcast, it was really because I saw people like yourself and some other astrologers, Rick Levine, and Ortley really holding the fort with your communities and really having a strong presence of you within that community. And I really appreciated that because for a long time, I'm a journalist by my previous profession, one of my previous professions. And so for a long time, it was very easy for me to hold space for other people, for them to share their stories and find out about how they got into astrology and really hold space for many astrologers at this point. But I think at the end of probably 2021, I really made the shift to wanting to just cultivate my own voice more on my platform. And I think people like yourself and, like I said, Rick and Anne were really pivotal in terms of me making that decision.
Yeah, maybe Saturn in Aquarius also sort of maybe pushed you to just do it and break out. And I think we're going to see a lot other. Well, no one can replace Mychal A. Bryan, first of all, but I'm just going to say, I think we're going to see probably a wave of people coming out of the closet. And that's a good segue, actually. You looking at your resume, first of all, man, like you are highly educated, but you started off as a clinical hypnotherapist. You've been a broadcast journalist, and now you're into astrology. How did that unfold for you? How did that evolve?
Well, the astrology has always been in my life, and the astrology and the tarot and Western mysticism, those things have been pillars in my life from I was a child, basically. From around the age of 12 years old, I bought my first tarot deck, and the tarot that I studied was greatly informed by traditional astrology. And so the tarot created the pipeline to astrology, and astrology created this world that just connects me to all of the other things I do. And I mean, that's really where everything started for me. I also grew up reading Harry Potter and Anne Rice and Interview with the Vampire and the Vampire Lestat. And so I think within that period, the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this moment where more and more people were gravitating towards magical, mystical ways of being and ancient sources of wisdom. And I know that was happening before that as well, but I think there was this really big surge that happened around the late 90s, early 2000s. Maybe J.K. Rowling had a massive role to play in that because she created this world with the Harry Potter novels where people just wanted to be a part of something that was big and special and unique and magical. And I started to seek that out for myself. But growing up in the Bahamas and Jamaica and Cuba, there really weren't places for that to be cultivated. So I was the only tarot astrology person for a very long time in the Bahamas and Jamaica. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it was huge, and I started giving readings far before I should have, and so I was 16 years old giving readings to the patrons of my aunt's nail salon, and I was 16 years old giving readings to people on the weekend in Kingston, Jamaica, so that I could have extra money to spend in university. And so it was a very pragmatic thing for me coming into professional practice at such a young age. And I grew that throughout my teens. And by the time as I was 20, I knew that I had a very strong practice and a very strong style of practice. And by the time as I was 25, I knew I wanted to move that into more of a more structured teaching environment. And so I think those are the stages of how I came to be doing what I'm doing today. And so I'm just backtracking a bit. Even the astrology is what paid for hypnotherapy school. The astrology is what subsidized a lot of my college, not necessarily my college tuition because I was on a scholarship, but it allowed me to have money in my pocket to spend, be a kid in college and just have pocket money. And the astrology and the tarot took me to studying dance in Cuba. The astrology and the tarot paid for me to study yoga. And so everywhere I went, the astrology and tarot, those two subjects, really were my major financial means of surviving.
That's a great story and inspirational too, because it's usually contrary. One would think that journalism was sponsoring the astrology and tarot, but you actually are self-made from those principles. I don't know if you believe in past lives, but do you believe you had studied it in a past life before? 16 is a young age to have that sort of talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I definitely believe in past lives, and I think that's something that I want to spend more of my time in 2024 focusing on, particularly within the context of my hypnotherapy and my dream work practice. I want to make more.
Hmm.
But I think in terms of coming into astrology, tarot, runes, divination, all of these things at that age, there was just something in the air at that time. There was something very ripe. And many of the newer astrologers who we see within the world are people who also had this moment of this itch within them
Yeah.
around that same period, the late 90s, early 2000s. So on the one hand, I think my thing was slightly special because I'm kind of anal retentive. I come from a very anal retentive part of the world where people feel as if they have to excel at things in order to make their mark on the world. So in terms of picking up astrology, I wanted to do it well because I knew I didn't have a teacher. There was no model around me for what good astrology should look like. I had no mentor in the Bahamas. The first place I even knew that other people did astrology at the level that I did it at was when I went to UAC, which the United Astrology Conference in Chicago in 2018. But
Mm.
before that, I was completely self-taught, self-made, self-trained, self-everything. And I'm very, very happy about that because now, today, the sort of astrology I share and the sort of teachings that I share are really unique and they don't really sound that similar to a lot of what's going on, even within the traditional astrology community where we think that everybody sounds the same. It still sounds unique because I had this very rich self-education before I even knew that there were or that there was a larger astrology community to be a part of.
Yeah, I will say that absolutely. One of the reasons I was excited to see you is because you are very unique. I would say the hybridization of the different forms. I mean, first, do you describe yourself as an event-based astrologer? Would you define for our audience what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I call my style of astrology concrete event-based astrology. And when I say that, there's a part of me that thinks that that's the stupidest thing in the world because that's just what traditional astrology is. Traditional astrology, if you had to describe traditional astrology, you would describe it as a system of concrete event-based astrology. If you had to describe Uranian astrology, you would describe it as a system of concrete event-based astrology. If you had to describe Indian astrology, Jyotish, Vedic astrology, you would describe it as a system of concrete event-based astrology. And the reason why all of these systems of astrology carry that same description is because within traditional Western astrology, traditional Indian astrology, or even Uranian astrology, there's this very great emphasis that's placed on the concrete events that occur within a person's life that make them who they are. Whereas in the 21st century, we tend to focus more on who this person is and the psychological factors that make them who they are, and the energetic factors that make them who they are, and the emotional factors that make them who they are. And we conduct an entire reading for an hour just talking about the psychology of a person and what it means to have this and this sign or whatever. Within all the systems of astrology, there's this emphasis on, yes, let's talk about who you are, but who you are is really a composite of all of these concrete events that have happened within your life in terms of your financial life, your family life, your life in terms of being a parent or not being a parent, your life in terms of your physical health and wellness, your life in terms of being married or not married, your life in terms of study, your life in terms of career. So concrete event-based astrology is more concerned with, and not just specific to me, but traditional astrology as an entire umbrella term, Uranian astrology and Indian astrology, these three systems of astrology are all concerned with, yes, first identifying who this person is, what their psychological constitution is, a standard understanding of who this person is astrologically. But after we do that, which takes up a very small portion of our reading, the next 90% of the reading, or probably 80% of the reading, is now that we know who this person is, what are the events that have occurred within their lives, financially, domestically, vocationally, physiologically, that have caused them to be that way. And so for me, that's a more interesting place to practice. And I value and cherish all systems of astrology, modern astrology, spiritual astrology, karmic astrology, all of them. And I think that there's also a very real importance for us to be able to look at the chart and speak about the events that that chart holds, because if we're going to there's a whole other spiel about going in the front of a panel of skeptics and what's going to convince them that astrology is accurate. And it's really not our ability to hold space or to psychoanalyze or to know mythology. It's really, can you read this person's chart and say what has happened within their lives? And so that's what I'm more concerned with within my practice.
So in a given reading with you, you'll go back through major aspects that have happened. And do you focus on revisiting the choice they made in their free will, or is your approach more, this happened to you to redirect you in a new way?
That's a really great question. And I wrote a book recently called Mastering Traditional Astrology, and there's a chapter within the book that I took out because it just didn't seem to jive with the larger flow of the book. And I'm going to put it later on in my natal book that's going to be coming out later. But it was a chapter essentially on this notion of fate and free will within.
Yeah, fascinating topic.
Yeah, it is. It's such a huge topic, and truthfully, when we look back at astrology, as astrology has always been a faith-based subject to a very large degree. And I'm not sure at what point this happened, but today people are more comfortable with the idea of destiny as a word than they are with the idea of fate as a word.
Mm-hmm.
I think destiny just sounds sexier, or it sounds cooler. Sounds, my destiny sounds like a more liberating thing than this idea of my fate. And so it's kind of crazy because those two words are basically synonymous of each other. And so for me, I believe that, and it comes out of my astrology practice as well, and it comes out of the style of astrology I practice. At this point within my life, I believe that our charts show us our natal promise, and that natal promise is what our fate or what our destiny is going to be within this lifetime. And the reality is that we all have latitude within that regarding how we're going to manifest that, whether we're going to manifest that in a very highly evolved way, or whether we're going to manifest that at the baseline. That is what our chart represents. And for the most part, at least for the first 30 years of our lives, we manifest what's in our chart at the baseline.
Yes.
And that isn't to be negative or anything. It's just to say we, as human beings, my philosophy tends to be that we tend to follow the path of least resistance. And sometimes the path of least resistance takes you to your fridge at 3 a.m. in the morning to eat a slice of cake,
Certainly for me.
Exactly, me too. So I mean, the reality is that sometimes our path of least resistance doesn't necessarily take us on the most evolutionary journey possible. And so we have to grow through cycles of living with our chart to evolve the promise that's within our chart and hopefully manifest it on a higher level. And some people do that. Some people do that. And I think a large majority of people don't. A large majority of people just keep on living the same story that's in their natal chart at the same basic level that it's told, which is why when they get a reading, it's like, oh my God, you know me so well. Well, I don't know you so well. I understand the rules of astrology, and I understand what this particular configuration looks like when it's manifested at its most basic level. And so it's not me knowing you well, it's just that you are manifesting this in the most predictable way possible. And that's why it sounds like I'm so familiar with you as a person, but I'm just familiar with how this manifests just on like a basic level. And other people who've lived longer, who've had more experiences, sometimes they choose to make an evolutionary decision to manifest their chart at a higher level. And those people do exist. I haven't really had those people as clients. And at the same time, they exist. So I'm kind of in the middle somewhat, but I'm still leaning more towards the destiny or fate side of things, because it's not that we don't have free will. I do believe we have free will. I just think that it's so much more comfortable to eat the cheesecake at 3 a.m. in the morning that we don't actually exercise that part of our free will that says, go back to bed.
So what you're suggesting is that the natal chart sort of has a groove, a rail that we're on, and we're always going to be on that track, but you're saying that we can actually float above the track at some point, that we can have an elevated expression of our destiny, and the free will is really in the elevation of the destiny rather than the destination itself of the destiny.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. And at the same time, from a yogic perspective, there's a concept, and I speak about this in my book as well, and it's called tamas. And tamas is one of the three gunas, or one of the three vital substances out of which our universe is created. There's sattva, rajas, tamas. And tamas corresponds with gravity or inertia or a sleep state. And the reality is that that gravity and that inertia and that sleep state is fundamentally very important in order for all of us to have a sense of familiarity as we move through this world. We are familiar with the fact that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, because that is a part of the gravity of being on this planet. The sun doesn't rise in the west and set in the east. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So there are these predictabilities of life that allows us to be comfortable within this life. And all of us, from a Vedic perspective, all of us are fundamentally deeply comfortable with the level of gravity that causes us to be exactly who we are. So the bird isn't trying to be the bee isn't trying to be the tree isn't trying to be the star. And fundamentally, at our core, we have the ability to change, but there's something very settling and something very comfortable and something very reassuring about being exactly who we've always been. And for better or for worse, really. So some people who come into this life with a pattern of being very heavily depressive, pessimistic people who dig themselves into a deep, watery hole, and they stay there and they grieve and they lick their wounds, regardless of how beautiful it is outside. Those people more than likely know that that isn't the most evolutionary way to live their lives, but they've been doing that for 30 years, 40 years, 60 years. So the level of momentum that they have behind how they've shown up within this world is so powerful that it, to a very large degree, negates the fact that they do have free will to not be a sad, depressive person who goes into the hole and licks their wounds. And so when we talk about this topic of fate and free will, I think it's a wonderful topic. And I think that a lot of the topic or a lot of the discussion largely dismisses the power of momentum. There's a lot of momentum that makes me love cheese. I love cheese. I think cheese is the most amazing thing in the world, and I've only just decided to stop eating cheese. And I love cheese. And whenever I feel like, I want to go back to the fridge and grab the cheese, because there's 30 years, 31 years of my life at this point of me going to the fridge and grabbing that cheese. And so it's probably going to take a very long time for me to break that momentum. And so I'm trying to step into that free will model within myself while still acknowledging that the larger momentum and the larger gravity of my own self-knowledge says that I'm a person who will eat cheese 24/7.
It seems to me in my research that what keeps us in that momentum are habitual thoughts and feelings, the moon and Mercury in particular. Do you believe, though, for instance, with Pluto moving into Aquarius for the first time since like 1777, I know it was just last year for a minute, do you believe that some people may be forced out of their comfort zones with Pluto and Aquarius? Or do you feel like we will still be able to hold on to the cheese?
I was thinking about this recently, and I think that the Pluto moving into Aquarius is interesting. I was having a conversation with Gary Kristen, who's the owner of ASTRO in Brewster, who distributes Solarfire, the astrology software.
Yes.
And his idea about the Pluto in Aquarius, I don't know, all astrologers, we kind of have our shtick and that we stick on that thing. So his whole thing with the Pluto in Aquarius is AI and how AI is revolutionizing things. And I think for me, I see that as being that for sure. And I think with the incoming of artificial intelligence, a lot of us are going to be forced into a place of really reconsidering what is real and what isn't real. And I think a lot of us are going to have our guards up. And some of that having our guards up might have to be with our own biases and our own, like you said, habitual thought patterns and our habitual emotional places that we run to. Because I was just watching something the other day about how there's a lot of propaganda going around because AI can be used to manipulate photos and even create video footage of things that didn't happen. And it's wild to think about that. And I'm not a person who ever gets sucked up in the world of, oh my God, the robots are going to kill us. But I think it was very wild to see that. And even as a self-published author, I just uploaded a new version of my book, Mastering Traditional Astrology, onto Amazon because there was some huge errors in the table of contents, not the table of contents, in the index that needed to be fixed. And when I uploaded the book earlier this year, there was no question on the Amazon publishers page regarding AI. And now there's a whole thing you have to fill out as a self-published author on Amazon that says, I solemnly swear that no part of this book was created through AI generation. And so the
Huh.
fact that, yeah, so like the fact that this is coming in so strongly into not only how we perceive information, but how people are writing books and how people are distributing information, I think it really says that all of us are going to have to be forced into a position where we practice a lot more discernment, but we also practice that discernment not just in terms of the information we're taking in, but also in terms of our own emotional habit patterns and responses, because a lot of what we see isn't even real. I saw a photo the other day floating around on the internet because I've been keeping my finger very much on the pulse of the war that's going on in Palestine.
Mhm.
And there was a photo floating around of the leaders of Hamas in an airplane, and they were counting money or something, and then it wasn't real. It just wasn't a real photo, and it looked so real. And so I'm saying all of this to say that a lot of times we get attached to things and we get attached to certain narratives, and we use these sources of information as a means of supporting our internally held narratives. But I think as we go deeper into 2024, as Pluto ingresses into Aquarius at the end of January, we are going to have to be forced to really take a look at what is real, what isn't real, outside in the world for sure, but also within ourselves.
Excellent point. I look at Pluto and Aquarius as, Pluto as a liberator and Aquarius of freedom. And I look at the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, who really birthed democracy, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. And with that freedom comes responsibility that has to be earned. And I think you can see in the AI example, it's like, okay, now a person who's zero creative, who doesn't have any talent whatsoever to throw a stick at, can now use AI and are completely free to create something that they would never have been or had created before. So it's interesting to see that freedom aspect. Definitely a lot of, and we'll see what is to come. It's interesting. I personally question if we'll be forced to raise our vibration. So do you look at Aquarius? How do you look at the sign of Aquarius? I know you're not very much into the signs. You've mentioned that on your YouTube channel. That's not your thing. You're not some cosmopolitan. Even though you started in a hair salon, you don't do the 12 signs.
Hey, a nail salon.
Okay, forgive me.
But
What is your thought of Aquarius in general, just as an energy, and Pluto in Aquarius, just from an energetic vibrational perspective?
yeah, so there's, as I'm sure you know, there's the whole rift in astrology regarding who's the ruler of Aquarius, and the
Yeah.
traditional astrologers say that it's Saturn, and there are reasons why in traditional astrology we say that it's Saturn, and then modern astrologers say that it's Uranus, and there are reasons within modern astrology why the notion is Uranus. And for me, I view the two signs, Capricorn and Aquarius, as representing two different components of Saturn. So whereas Capricorn can only see, and I have a whole spiel about this, but whereas Capricorn represents the tail of Saturn, or the bottom of Saturn, the part of Saturn that can look down on the world and see exactly how the world should be. I view Aquarius as being the head of Saturn, the part that can look upward towards the sky and see what else is there and what other possibilities exist. And so within the Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, I see that as being, I kind of think of planets and signs as a conjunction of that ruler of that sign and that planet. So I think of Pluto and Saturn as the highest way of how Saturn can manifest. And for me, if that represents seeing the future, and if Pluto represents a threshold moment or a threshold experience or a moment of forced initiation or growth or metamorphosis, I think that the Pluto ingressing into Aquarius has to do with us going through a process of metamorphosis regarding how we interact with the future and regarding how we interact with our role on the future and our place in the future. So more simply, Pluto in Aquarius for me feels like a transformation of how we think about technology for sure, a transformation of how we think about how we communicate, a transformation or a metamorphosis in terms of the sorts of thoughts that we want to crystallize that will move us into the next 20 years. And so all of these things with Pluto and Aquarius are really important for me in terms of what are the new thoughts we're thinking, what are the new crystals of programming that we're investing or projecting into the future. How are we moving into the future and knowing that this next 20-year period is going to crystallize something very important within our humanity in terms of how we evolve and how we grow and how we change. And I think technology has a big role to play in that, but also all of us as individual human beings have a big role to play in that, because who are we going to be? And how are we also taking part in this evolutionary process of growth and change? And what parts of ourselves are we letting go of? Because Pluto, as we know, is also a god of death. So what part of ourselves are we sacrificing? What part of ourselves do we realize we cannot take over the threshold of the future with? What part of ourselves do we have to let go of in order for us to have the lightness and the freedom to move forward into the future and to think new thoughts and to see new visions and to have a new concept of who we can be and who our world can be? All of these things are really traumatic on the one hand, but they're also very liberating on the other hand, because the Pluto and Aquarius is giving all of us the opportunity to let go of the garbage, let go of the things that have been weighing us down, and to really step boldly into a brand new world, I think.
Indeed, I have to say, when Pluto went into Aquarius, of course, it's never in my lifetime. Out of Capricorn, I felt a huge relief of energy and heaviness that I felt really since Pluto and Saturn conjoined in 2020 in Capricorn. It seemed to have been heavy from 2023 all the way to Pluto and Aquarius, and things just lightened up. Or maybe I just didn't care. I can't quite tell, but I welcome it, whatever it brings. Bring it on, Pluto.
Definitely.
In your biography, you mentioned that you were both a Renaissance astrologer and a Uranian astrologer. And it seems like quite an expansive bridge you have sewn together there. Can you define each of these for us and sort of how they intermingle in your practice?
Yeah, Renaissance astrology is referring to a system of astrology that was really established in the 16th century and really took a foothold in Europe in the 17th century. And so we have, I think, the largest Renaissance astrologer that we know about is William Lilly. He is the person who everybody talks about. He is definitely not the only influential astrological voice, but he was a very big one. And so Renaissance astrology is basically the same as all traditional Western astrology, with the exception of it having more of a clear system of practice. As we go deeper into Hellenistic astrology and Babylonian astrology, we see the astrology trying to take a shape, but we see it also being in a very nebulous state where there's some speculative things that were done and said that don't really happen in the Renaissance. For example, in Hellenistic astrology, the sun would be taken as the ruler of your father and your boss and your grandfather and just men in your life in general, so your husband. So in the Renaissance, they said, oh yeah, well, what happens if your dad died and you hate your boss, but you love your husband, and your grandfather was a douchebag? What happens if all of these people who this one son is supposed to represent are all very, very different people, and you have very different relationships to them? And so how they fixed that or addressed that in the Renaissance was by really focusing on the houses. And so we find in Renaissance astrology, this idea of houses and house rulership and planets in houses and the rulers of houses carrying the significance of those houses, other places in the chart. We find that whole doctrine of houses really coming to life in the Renaissance period. And so that's what I love about that. It's a very clear, clean system where there are 12 houses, which means we're going to spend our entire session talking about these 12 main topics within your life, knowing that within those 12 topics, we're really talking about every single component of your life, not just in terms of the houses themselves, but also in terms of the planets that rule those houses and the aspects that the rulers of houses have with each other. So it's a wonderful system. I love it so much. It's a very clean system where we could talk about your brother and the relationship your brother has with his wife, and the relationship your mother had with her father, and the relationship your mother had with your father, and the relationship your husband has with your mother. And it's a very wonderful peopled astrology. And I think that we don't really find that so much in modern astrology per se, but in the Renaissance, there was this really clear understanding that our charts don't just contain us, they contain all of our intimate connections and the intimate connections of those intimate connections. So I've spoken to people before about the relationship that their siblings have with their spouses, and they were amazed. But this is just something that is just a standard part of traditional astrology in that period. So that's Renaissance astrology. And then Uranian astrology is a system of astrology that was established in Germany around the early 1920s during the First World War. And Uranian astrology is essentially, I consider it to be taking us back to the oldest roots of astrology, because Uranian astrology is all about the planets and how planets interact with each other, and how the interaction of planets with each other tells us about these larger concrete events that occur within our lives, which is kind of what I was just poo-pooing Hellenistic astrology about earlier. But
Right. Yeah. There lies the complexity of you.
Exactly. Exactly. But Uranian astrology, I think, does it in a far more elegant way, and it's not as clunky as a lot of very old astrology. Because in very, very old astrology, we have to try to make multiple things mean something based on one thing. Whereas in Uranian astrology, there's a broader spectrum of how planets can interact with each other, and how the combinations of 2 planets, 3 planets, 4 planets, 6 planets all mean something different. And we don't really find that level of nuance happening before the invention of Uranian astrology. So I love it. I love both Renaissance astrology and Uranian astrology for how concrete they are. And I use them because they both corroborate each other very well. And I use them as a means of corroborating each other. And there was a time when I drank the Uranian Kool-Aid too hard, and I thought that, hey, well, this traditional astrology stuff doesn't make sense because it's so different from what I'm doing now. And then there was times when I've been disillusioned by Uranian, and I've said, hey, this is so stupid, it doesn't make sense in the context of the larger tradition. But at this point in my life, I just focus on what works. And both of these systems of astrology, they work extraordinarily well. They're extraordinarily powerful systems. And that's why I use them and teach them.
So from my understanding, Uranian astrology, I actually have done zero study in that field. So you're introducing it to me for the first time. And thank you for that, sir, for representing. It has a lot of use of midpoints from what I'm studying and reading about. Does it still employ 8 extra planets or imaginary planets as well? Was that just a phase in Uranian astrology? And then I know they went through a period where the Nazis literally shut them down, and they were able to be revived once the war was over. So so there was a lot of shakeup in its core belief structure. Where is Uranian astrology today with the 8 imaginary planets?
8 imaginary planets. All right. So that's a very good point. And so we call them the hypothetical points, or the hypothetical planets. And so the founder of Uranian astrology, Alfred Witte, was an extraordinary man. He was a surveyor. He was in the army. He plotted out the missile trajectories, the what is that called? The airport in Hamburg, Germany, is created based on his designs. He designed the layout of the airport in Hamburg, Germany. So he was a brilliant engineer, a brilliant scientist, a brilliant man. And so he proposed, before we even discovered Pluto, he proposed that there should be something where Pluto currently is. And he did that using Bode's law. So Bode's law says that from the sun, there are specific intervals where planets should be. And it's using Bode's law that we even discovered the asteroid belt. Because according to Bode's law, there should be a planet between the Earth and Mars. There should be a planet there, but there is no planet there. But astronomers in the 17th century, applying Bode's law, realized, wow, there is this field of floating gravel. And so now our modern conception of that field of floating gravel is that there was a planet between the Earth and Mars at some point in time that was destroyed by a meteor or something. That's the working theory of what the asteroid belt is. And so essentially, Alfred Witte took Bode's law and he extended that through space beyond Neptune at the time, because at the time we had only discovered up to Neptune. So that's why the trans-Neptunian planets are called the trans-Neptunian planets. They're not called the trans-Plutonian planets because there was no Pluto in the 1920s, because Pluto was discovered in 1930. And so Alfred Witte, using Bode's law as well as astrology, said, hey, there should be something where there's nothing, where we haven't discovered anything yet. And then probably a decade later, I think it was William, what's his name? It was Percival Lowell discovered Pluto, exactly where Alfred Witte said something should be. And so the four trans-Neptunian planets were discovered by Alfred Witte, and they're hypothetical points. And I think that that's this idea in Uranian astrology has also been contentious, because the astrological contention is, well, there's nothing there. How can you believe in it? To which I say to astrologers, your ascendant isn't there. Your midheaven isn't there. Your part of fortune doesn't even exist.
Parts, North Node. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's so much in astrology that we use that just isn't real, which I think goes to the larger scientific argument that none of this is supposed to work anyway, because none of it is real. But I think that we as astrologers, we've become accustomed to holding on vehemently to our ascendant, our North Node, our South Node, our second house cusp, our IC midheaven, none of which actually is floating around in the sky. And so we have this understanding as an astrological community that there are sensitive points that exist for all of us that impact us in extraordinary ways that have a major impact on the larger unfolding of our lives. And that's what Alfred Witte proposed. He said in the middle of the war that there are things that are impacting his astrological calculations where there should not be things. And these things, these four things, Cupido, Hades, Zeus, Kronos, because those were the only trans-Neptunian planets that he directly contributed. His protege, Frederick Sigrun, is the one who discovered Apollon, Admetos, Vulcanus, and Poseidon. But Alfred Witte said, hey, I'm making these calculations for when these bombs are supposed to drop. And there are things that are affecting my calculations where there shouldn't be things. There seems to be wells of cosmic potency that are moving with the same sort of regularity as our normal planets that we use in astrology, that are directly impacting the astrological configurations or the astrological data that I'm collecting. And that's how we came up with the first four trans-Neptunians. And after that, a decade later, we discovered that, hey, there is actually more things in the sky than Neptune. We discovered Pluto, essentially where Alfred Witte said Cupido is supposed to be. And we discovered the entire Kuiper belt. And now today, people are so enamored with the Kuiper belt, and they want to talk about Hayameya and Makemake and Sedna and Eris and all of this stuff. But Alfred Witte's work predates the Kuiper belt, and his work is actually in support of saying there's actually a field of possibility beyond Neptune that we haven't even tapped into. And today we call that the Kuiper belt. And Alfred Witte described that through his four trans-Neptunian planets.
Fascinating. So he was seeing really an effect, some sort of an effect happening in his calculations. He saw the evidence of, but couldn't find it. And do you feel that Hades has become Eris and Sedna is Zeus, or is it literal like that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and I've never actually thought about that before, because I tend to be, when I'm practicing traditional astrology, I'm completely in that realm, and so I don't bring trans-Neptunian planets into a 12 houses chart because they don't belong there, and there are a lot of astrologers who do that. But they don't belong there. They're not supposed to be in your pizza pie chart. They junk up the chart. They make the chart look overwhelming. And so I only use the classical planets and Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and Chiron on my traditional astrology charts. And my relationship with Chiron has been a very contentious one for years.
I watched that in your videos. I think all of us have contentious relationship to Chiron, by the way.
No, I mean it's the truth. And I thought Chiron was the stupidest thing in the world, and I thought people who believed in Chiron were so stupid. And then it kind of bulldozed into my practice because of Moon Chiron. People started to come and they started to have stories about their mother, the worst stories in the world, the most harrowing stories in the world. And there was nothing in their chart from a traditional perspective that supported those stories, save for the fact that those people had hard aspects between their moon and Chiron.
Hmm.
And I'm a facts and figures sort of person. 9 times out of 10, when somebody has an exact or a very close to exact hard aspect of Moon and Chiron, they have some maternal story that's shocking. And the stories have been, my mother doesn't love me. My mother wanted a boy, but she had a girl. My mother wanted a dog, but she had a child. My mother locked herself in the room and said she'd commit suicide. My mother locked herself in the room and did commit suicide. There are all of these harrowing stories. My mother was on horse tranquilizers with the Moon Chiron.
Hmm.
And so I think that's how I conduct astrological research. I don't want to read Melanie Reinhardt's book on Chiron. I don't want to read anybody's thing on Chiron. I want to put it in my own charts and see whether or not it shows up for me. And so I use the Chiron now. But I don't have a whole laundry list of things to say about Chiron. I know about Moon Chiron, I know about Venus Chiron. I probably even have things to say about Mercury Chiron, but just because I have things to say about Moon, Mercury, and Venus Chiron, that doesn't mean I'm gonna make up stuff about somebody who has Sun Chiron because I just don't have the same body of research about Sun Chiron as I do with Moon Chiron. So anyway, point
Hmm.
is that in terms of the trans-Neptunian planets specifically, I only use them within the Uranian astrology dials, whether that's the 360 dial or the 90-degree dial, because they look cleaner on that format. And I don't use Eris, I don't use Sedna, I don't use Maki Maki, I don't use Hayame, I don't use the Field of Centaurs because that feels overwhelming for me. And I can't really justify why I should use Alfred Vitter's strange imaginary planets, but I don't actually want to use the real, Sedna, Eris. I can't justify it other than saying that this is how we do it in Uranian astrology. And I've grappled with the trans-Neptunian planets for a very long time, which is why when I teach Uranian astrology, the first way I teach it is through a cosmobiology lens. Cosmobiology is kind of knockoff, rip-off Uranian astrology. It's kind of Uranian light, basically, because cosmobiology is midpoints and no trans-Neptunian planets. And that's why cosmobiology in the 80s and 90s became such a household name within astrology because it was just midpoints and no trans-Neptunian planets. And in Uranian astrology, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot because we held on to the trans-Neptunian planets and all of the other things that tends to make people feel as if Uranian is complicated. But I'm trying to do a whole Uranian revival at the moment. And in doing that, I start by teaching people how to use the dials without the trans-Neptunian planets first. And then after that, I teach them about the trans-Neptunian planets so that people can have the freedom and the space to choose to use them if they want to.
Hmm. I've heard some interesting discussions amongst our community in the sense that the planets up through Pluto are the solar system, the existence of Earth and incarnation on Earth, and a suggestion that the Kepler belt planets, or in this case, the trans-Neptunian, may actually have to do more with our karma with other solar systems or aliens or extra dimensionals. And as our awareness of extra dimensionals awakens, perhaps also our astrology, and perhaps even, mapping where we are star seeds, perhaps where we originally, made a pilgrimage to Earth from one of these galaxies back before Atlantis or Lemuria. And that as we awaken to these Kepler belt planets, perhaps that has more to do with our intergalactic awareness and will unfold organically.
Mm-hmm.
How do the midpoints play out for you? To what end do you use them effectively in your readings?
Midpoints are the combinations of the two planets that they represent. So they're the blending together of the two planets that they represent. So in So this is a two-pronged question because on the one hand, midpoints, this idea of using midpoints is really a cosmobiology idea because the cosmobiologists, they didn't really understand some of the more nuanced parts of Uranian astrology. So Uranian astrology really isn't about midpoints per se. That's a part of Uranian astrology, but and that's a part of Uranian astrology. That's the part that the cosmobiologists stole and ran away with.
Mhm.
But the whole school of techniques and practices that we use in Uranian astrology that the cosmobiologists couldn't understand, or they thought it was too difficult, which is why they landed with the midpoints. However, I do use midpoints as well. And so, for example, if I'm doing a reading and I'm looking at somebody's natal promise in terms of love, I look at the sun moon midpoint. The sun moon midpoint from a Uranian astrology perspective is man and woman, but that could also represent any couple who's in love. And so I look at the sun moon midpoint to see what are the planets that are falling on that person's sun moon midpoint. If it's if it's Pluto, for example, they're probably going to be in a very overwhelming relationship with somebody who is probably also very wealthy, but somebody who probably also pulls all of the strings and is a very domineering person. If it's Uranus, they're probably going to be in a relationship with an astrologer because Uranus is the planet of the astrologer. But it's also going to be a very erratic relationship, an unusual relationship, a relationship that doesn't actually fit our social norms. If Neptune is on the Sun Moon midpoint, the person is probably going to be in a relationship with a pharmacist or a drug dealer or somebody who's working in the Neptunian profession. But more often than not, having Neptune on the Sun Moon midpoint is very similar to having Neptune conjunct your seventh house cusp, which is very similar to having a Venus Neptune conjunction. And when we read our book in Uranian astrology, rules for planetary pictures on the Venus Neptune conjunction, it reads as disappointment in love. So having
Mm.
Neptune on your sun moon midpoint very often can lead to a relationship that a person really idealized a lot. But as a result of that level of idealization, led them to having this experience of a very disappointing romantic relationship or connection. And we just go down through the entire list of planets essentially. And so the point is, if a person has a planet on their sun moon midpoint, I would interpret that in relationship to their love story. And there are other love midpoints. There's the Venus Jupiter midpoint, which has to do with lover's bliss, which is also kind of a proxy of the sun moon midpoint. And so I look at the sun moon, but I also look at the Venus Jupiter together because those two midpoints directly describe this sort of relationship a person is likely to have. The Venus Saturn midpoint is going to describe why a person is divorcing from somebody else. What's the reason why these two people can't get along? What's the cause of the divorce in this relationship? The Mercury Saturn midpoint is going to represent relocation and somebody's likelihood to relocate because Mercury Saturn, the coming together of those two planets means to say goodbye, the goodbye coming from the Saturn and the to say coming from the Mercury. So in a solar return chart, for example, if somebody has the sun on the Mercury Saturn midpoint, then it's likely that this is going to be a year when they relocate or something to that effect. So the
Mm.
various point combinations, they're like a secret code, and each of them has a very specific meaning in terms of how they manifest within a life. And some of them are more important than others. And so I don't use every single midpoint, but I have my laundry list of midpoints that I would use for the first house, for example, or the fourth house, or this, or children. I have my go-to midpoints to look for fertility in a person's chart. I have my go-to midpoints to look for health within a person's chart, health and sickness. I have my go-to midpoints for relationships and love, my go-to midpoints for travel and relocation, my go-to midpoints for career. And that's kind of how I organize my use of the midpoint specifically when I'm practicing astrology in that way.
So just to be clear, you will see in the midpoint, let's say the sun and moon midpoint, client A's sun and moon midpoint, you'll see if their client A's Pluto is on client A's midpoint. You're not
Exactly.
seeing if client B's planet is on client A's midpoint. Okay.
No. Because going back to what I was speaking about earlier in terms of this natal promise and in terms of your natal chart will show your natal promise, your natal destiny in this lifetime, even independent of you superimposing somebody else's chart on top of your chart specifically is going to show your marriage destiny or fate within this lifetime, your domestic destiny or fate within this lifetime, your career and vocational destiny or fate within this lifetime. So I primarily, when it comes to working with a client, I specifically work with their own chart because that is already enough work already. And I
Right.
I
Yeah.
seldom have a reason to look at somebody else's chart in tandem with their chart. And if somebody asks, I'll do it on the spot. But I usually don't because more often than not, the issues that we're going through are completely contained within the realities of our own natal destiny. And it makes more sense to figure out what does your year look like this year in terms of love, as opposed to seeing whether or not you and this other person should get a divorce. What does your chart say about it? Does your chart say that you're getting a divorce this year? Does your chart describe the reasons for that divorce? Does your chart describe that this year the relationship has become so untenable that this is when the divorce is going to happen? What is your destiny? Let's focus on you because the clearer you are about you and the clearer you are about your own sense of direction, the clearer you'll be in terms of how you relate to other people around you.
Hmm. Do you do relationship astrology in the sense of like the composite midpoint method and look at how two charts come together in midpoint to look at how the relation is working between the two energies, or do you still keep it in a silo of just client A?
Whenever I do synastry, I look at the two charts side by side, and the composite chart, I tend to want to believe that I'm a very simple sort of person. So
Oh, come on, Mychal. I'm going to break that. I'm going to break that belief right now. We haven't even got through a third of your resume yet.
so but I mean like when it comes to when it comes to synastry, I think that when it comes to astrology, I think that less is more, which is
Mhm.
for a very long time. I didn't even integrate Uranian astrology into my practice. I had
Mm.
studied Uranian astrology for years before I integrated it into my practice. I studied it just because I love to study foreign languages. And for me, Uranian astrology was a foreign language. And so
Mhm.
I studied it. I understood the things I needed to understand about it. I mastered Uranian astrology as far as I needed to, but I never really integrated it into my practice because for me, less is more. I can give a phenomenal reading, just traditional astrology, and I didn't see why I needed to now learn how to give a phenomenal reading in this other system of astrology. Just felt like too much work. And
Mhm.
now today, using the two of them together, I realize how compatible they are. But when it comes to astrology in general, less is more for me. And so if I'm going to read a relationship for someone and they definitely want me to, do the composite sort of situation, I look at the two charts separately. So I can say, what is your love destiny within this lifetime? What is
Okay.
your love language? How do you respond in love? How do you respond in life in general? Who are you as a person? Going back to that question of who is the person who has this chart? What is the psychological structure of this person? How are you psychologically oriented to life in general? Is your overarching psychological orientation to life one in which you even need to be in a relationship, one in which you even will desire long-lasting love? Are you a love sort of person by yourself? And then I do the same thing for the other person. I say, what is this other person's psychological orientation to life? And before I even start to talk about the love between the two of you, let's just talk about the compatibility of chart A and chart B together. Because the person who values stability, values security, values very conservative ideals, who needs to have a solid roof over their head, is probably not going to be the most compatible person in the world with the digital nomad who wants to move to Portugal because they found out they can have a remote working visa and they don't need to live anywhere and they don't really have a real job, but they do freelance work and somehow they end up putting food on the table and some nights they don't eat, but that's okay. It's a very different sort of thing. And so for me, that is the best type of relationship astrology. And by the time is we're done that, and the three people in the room, myself and the clients in the front of me, have sat with that and have swam within that and have been like, wow, this is really descriptive of who we are individually. And this is really showing some of the strengths and some of the challenges of who we are collectively. And it's also giving us tools for how to move forward. I don't even have the time to go into a composite chart. I could, but I give every reading I give a solid 1 hour cutoff time. And I think the benefit of me having the sort of school I have and building the sort of community that I've built with hundreds of students at this point is that I have the opportunity to. I'm also a very lazy person, which I'm sure you understand being a Taurus person as well. I'm a very lazy, so I don't like to work harder than I need to. So when it comes to my client work, I do rigorous client preparation, but I do that as a means of teaching my students. So for example, if I have a client tomorrow at 1 p.m., because I think that's the time I usually take clients, at 1 p.m. If I have a client tomorrow at 1 p.m., I'll call together a collective of my students and I say, hey, come and assist me with my client work. Assisting me with my client work is really just sitting down and holding me accountable to doing the client preparation to begin with, because I'm the sort of person who, at this point in my life, I'm comfortable going into a reading with 15 minutes of preparation. However, because I know that I have a community of students who want to see how I prepare, I spend the hour before the actual reading or the hour and 15 minutes before the actual reading. And I go through every client chart I have meticulously, step by step by step by step, so that I could use that as a learning opportunity for my students. But I also use that as a means of giving the client a more comprehensive reading, because I mean, if I'm good in a reading with 15 minutes of preparation, I'm even better with an hour and a half of preparation. So that's how I do my client preparation these days. And at the point at which I've done an hour and a half of that, and I've sat with you for an hour, I really don't want to sit with you for an extra 5 minutes, because it's already too much time and you're not paying me for the hour and a half of preparation I did before that. You're really just paying me for the hour that we have together. So I'm not going to have time after I look at your chart and your husband's chart and your baby daddy's chart or whoever else's chart. I'm not really going to have time to now whip out the composite chart and talk about, it's too much.
It is a lot. And I thank you for bringing that up too, because I think a lot of people who are connoisseurs of buying readings or like, did you run this chart? Did you run that chart? Did you, have you looked at the progressions? Have you looked at, and it's like, look, I can get a great reading from dropping wax into water. Okay. Like I've had like rune readings that blew me away. Like spirit and the intelligence of spirit is in absolutely everything. And, and back in the day, it was only visible planets anyways. And I'm sure they were, guiding kings. So I see that. The only experience I've had with midpoint composite charts, just to relay, is just the timing of relationship changes seems to be really accurate with transits. And so I'll look to that to see, well, do I see something happening in the relationship there? Another interesting tangent, we can go forever in the directions that you've studied. In one of your recent videos called Every Aspect to the Midheaven, you mentioned the ascendant as the indicator of one's environment, which I found to be fascinating, and the midheaven as the indicator of one's uniqueness. Where does this come from, this perspective? Because it's new to me.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to give myself a solid 5 minutes to talk about this, because I could talk about this forever. And so I have to like internally time myself.
You have to budget, a little Scorpio there. Okay.
But okay. So from an astronomical perspective, your ascendant is the coming together of your location, the specific location in the east, and the sun's orbital path, which is the ecliptic, also called the zodiac. So your ascendant is created based on your location on this earth and how your physical location on this earth intersects with the heavenly path of the sun. So the ascendant is the crossing of heaven and earth, essentially. And that's how we calculate the ascendant. When you're calculating a chart by hand, the ascendant isn't even the primary factor. The ascendant is a secondary factor, because when you use a table of houses to calculate a chart by hand, you have to first look for the midheaven. That's how we calculate charts with math. We look for the midheaven first, and then we figure out where the ascendant should be. So the ascendant is always a secondary factor in astrology. However, throughout, or probably for the last 1,000 years in astrology, we started to view the ascendant. And I don't even know if started is the right word, but we have at least 2,000 years of astrological history in which the ascendant is seen as the be-all and the end-all in traditional astrology. Your ascendant is your soul and your psyche and your emotions and your psychological orientation to this life. The ascendant represents the physical vehicle that you travel in, but it also represents the physical body that you travel in. The ascendant is you in every way imaginable. This is the rhetoric of traditional astrology, and it makes complete sense from a traditional astrological perspective. It makes 1,000% sense in traditional astrology that we should start every reading from the first house, because what other house are you going to start it from, basically? If you're doing a house-based situation, you start from 1 and you make your way to 12. And so the ascendant is all of these things. However, the reality of what the ascendant is astronomically is the ascendant is an indication of location. The ascendant is a purely spatial construct. If you had no birth location, you would have no ascendant at all, because we cannot calculate the ascendant without knowing where you physically are on this earth. The midheaven, on the other hand, is a far more metaphysical thing, because the midheaven has to do with the moment or the exact time that something happens. The ascendant is based on your location, but the midheaven is based on your specific, what is that called? On your specific longitude line, your local meridian, as it were. Your local meridian is what gives you a particular time zone. So you might be on Mountain Time, for example, in Colorado, and I'm on Eastern Standard Time in Boston. And that's because we all have a local meridian, and that local meridian corresponds with time. So whereas the ascendant is the crossing point of your physical location on this earth with heaven, the midheaven represents the specific moment of you and how the moment of who you are as a person intersects with the cosmos. Because heaven is the crossing of your local meridian and the sun's orbital path, or your local meridian and the zodiac. That is your midheaven. So the midheaven is far closer to the soul of who we are as human beings, because from a metaphysical perspective, time is closer to the soul than space. So when we look at a chart from a Uranian astrology perspective, the midheaven is our first go-to, because the midheaven is you. The midheaven is the I. The midheaven represents the exact moment that you stepped into this physical embodiment or into this world. That is the midheaven. The midheaven is the gauge of who you are within this lifetime. The midheaven represents the soul within Uranian astrology, whereas the ascendant represents the location, which is kind of what it's always been, but we just haven't ever spoken about it in that way before, because who knows, there's a lot of political reasons behind that as well. But the ascendant also specifically represents location. And so from an astrological perspective, your midheaven is the moment, but your ascendant is the location. And so when we translate that, well, from an astronomical perspective, the midheaven is the moment, the ascendant is the location. So when we translate that into the symbology of astrology, the midheaven becomes you, and the ascendant becomes your environment. And so that's where this comes from. And we find this happening. We find this happening in Uranian astrology, this understanding. And Uranian astrologers have never been very loquacious people. Uranian astrology suffers because Uranian astrologers tend not to write very good books, and they tend not to speak very clearly. And so the cosmobiologist, and I'm sorry if I keep on drawing this comparison between Uranian and cosmobiology, but it's important to understand kind of the difference between them. The cosmobiologists have always been fancier because they had a fancier name,
Mhm.
cosmobiology. Who wouldn't want to be a cosmobiologist? It sounds amazing, cosmobiology, cosmobiology. So the cosmobiologists, they had a fancier name, but they also wrote better books because Reinhold Eberton, who was the founder of cosmobiology, was a journalist. He knew how to write, he knew how to speak, he knew how to sell. Whereas the Uranian astrologers, when you really sit down and have a conversation with the Uranian astrologer, it's like talking to mud, basically, or like talking to mud from another planet. It sounds so foreign and so strange. And there's something within our Uranian collective where Uranian astrologers tend not to speak clearly. It's fascinating to me. And so I've kind of made it my mission in life to present Uranian astrology in the clearest, most accessible way possible. And I understand why it's difficult to do that because there is a lot in Uranian astrology where you find yourself talking about some very nuanced concepts that just aren't a part of the larger astrological norm. But the point of the matter is that in Uranian astrology, that's the first place we find this idea of the midheaven being you and the ascendant being your location. And everything else I added to that is purely me adding to kind of explain it in a better way. But we also find it in cosmobiology as well, because once again, cosmobiology is kind of a carbon copy of the same concepts we find in Uranian astrology.
So it sort of lends to the idea that we are the psychological idea that we are the product of our environment. It would almost say, so your rising, your personality is derived from the location of your birth, that you were part of, I'm up in the mountains right now in Colorado. So it's like, so if I was born here, which I wasn't, Colorado, the environment of Colorado would be what has the greatest impact on my ascendant, is what this is it was what you're saying. Does environment then play into the future beyond the birth point as far as interpretation of the ascendant?
Yeah, when I interpret the ascendant, traditionally speaking, I do two things. On the one hand, I look at the ascendant from a traditional perspective because the rules of traditional astrology work perfectly within traditional astrology and they shouldn't be taken out of that context. You can't apply traditional astrology rules to Uranian astrology because you can't go into Uranian astrology talking about the ruler of your fourth house because that just makes no sense at all within Uranian land. Because in Uranian land, there is no ruler of the fourth house. There's no ruler of houses. There's no houses.
Hmm.
So you can't really take a traditional mindset into Uranian, and you shouldn't. They're two completely separate languages. And if you're going to use them, and this is something I tell my students all the time. If you're going to use them, you have to have a clear demarcation within yourself regarding where the traditional ends and where the Uranian begins. So when I give a reading traditionally, I always start with the ascendant because that's just what we do in traditional astrology. And I do the full treatment of the ascendant in terms of the person's soul and their psyche and their psychological orientation to life and all of that stuff. But if that person also has a planet conjunct their ascendant or a planet that is parallel, contraparallel, semi-square, sesquiquadrate, square, opposite, antitia, contra antitia, if a person has a planet that has any of these hard aspect relationships to their ascendant, then that gives me more information about their early childhood environment. Now, we're accustomed to thinking about the fourth house as the early childhood environment, which I mean, fine, it does that as well. But the ascendant and the fourth house specifically, the fourth house represents your family. The ruler of the fourth house, from a traditional perspective, represents the father. And traditionally, we say that the fourth house and the rule of the fourth house represent the father. But within my practice and my teaching and what I share, I say the fourth house represents your family unit, and the rule of the fourth house represents your father. And the ascendant in Uranian astrology represents your early childhood environment. What was your experience of your early childhood environment? What happened within your early childhood environment? And how did those experiences of your early childhood environment directly mold and shape the person who you are today? So people who have Uranus rising, for example, seldom do you find a person with Uranus rising who doesn't come from a family of divorce, where their parents separated and they had to go back and forth between the two parents forever. And if that's not the case, the other story usually tends to be my parents worked in the military, and as a result of that, we were a military family. I had no stability in my early childhood environment. Why? Because you have Uranus rising. And if that's not the case, my family was a family of missionaries, or my family they were hippies, and we lived a very nomadic, communal sort of lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. But usually it's they come from a family of divorce or they come from a military family, because that's just what tends to show up the most within my own practice. But the point of saying all of this is that it is the ascendant. The ascendant is representing your early childhood environment, and the fact that Uranus is conjunct your ascendant is representing what your experience of your early childhood environment was.
And just to go back one more point in that, I also saw in a video that you saw the ruler of the fourth house as father, but the remainder of the fourth house as mother. Am I correct in that? And the ruler of the 10th house is mother, and the remainder of the 10th house is father or career? I misunderstood that? Okay, tell me.
So the ruler of the fourth house is the father. The fourth house itself. So if you have planets in the fourth house, those planets in the fourth house will signify your family, your story of being in a family, your story of familial connections. So for example, you could have your father as the rule of your fourth house conjunct your ascendant. You and your father were wonderful people. You even look like your father, because usually when people have the rule of the fourth house conjunct their ascendant, they look like their father. Whereas when they have the rule of their 10th house conjunct the ascendant, they look like their mother. So you have the rule of the fourth house in your first house, you look like your daddy, and everything's wonderful. But you have Mars, for example, in the fourth house. You have Mars and Saturn in the fourth house. Then you could say you have a good relationship with your dad. You look like your dad, blah, blah, blah. But you also come from a very warlike family environment, or a very wrathful family environment. Maybe your dad was a police officer, or maybe there was this feeling of war on the ground, or that your family was a battlefield. And if Saturn is there as well, you probably also grew up in a house full of older people, or maybe your grandparents lived with you or something like that. So this is the distinction between the fourth house being a house, being the family, and the ruler of that house being the father. Now, the 10th house, for example, in traditional astrology, we say the 10th house is the mother. But once again, in actual applied practice, that isn't really true. Because in traditional astrology, the ruler of the 10th house is going to be a mother. Aspects according to the rule of your 10th house location of the rule of your 10th house, all of these things are going to pertain to your mother. The rule of the 10th house and the moon. Those two things are what we use as the gauge of the mother. So what about the planets in the 10th house? The planets in the 10th house are specifically signifying your career. And the planet, and this is because the planets in the 10th house are more than likely going to be the most highest elevated planets within your chart. And any planet that is the highest elevated planet within your chart is going to have a major impact on who you are as a person, but also on your likes and dislikes. So if you have Saturn as the highest elevated planet within your chart, chances are you yourself are a very Saturnian person. And chances are you gravitate towards a very Saturnian career. That might be you work for the government, you could be a civil servant, you could work in some sort of service work, or some sort of as a service giver or a service provider, whether you're a cleaner or a janitor or some sort of lower income sort of job, if you're not specifically working for the government, but you gravitate towards things where you are a beast of burden, essentially, because that's what having Saturn in the 10th could indicate. Whereas if a person has Uranus in the 10th house, that person could work in sales, for example, because sales is a very quick sort of you eat what you kill sort of industry. And Uranus is a planet that tends to manifest in that sort of way. Venus in the 10th house, you could work in the beauty industry. That doesn't mean that your mother was a Venusian person, because planets in the 10th house specifically signify our career, whereas the ruler of the 10th house is specifically signifying our mother. So this is a distinction that I teach and that I bring forth in my astrology. I don't really hear a lot of people doing it, and I think it's a worthy distinction, especially if you're going to, give a public demonstration. You need to be very sure about what different things mean and where you're getting your information from within the larger unfolding of the chart that you're reading.
Excellent. I'll start looking at those specifics in my clients and see what I find.
Mhm.
This circle's all full 360 really to your school, the Oraculos. Is that how you pronounce it? School of Astrology. Where did you
Oracular.
get that name? That's where's that? What's the derivative of that name? First of all, I'm curious.
Oraculos is Latin for oracle.
Okay.
And so there's that. And it's also in Spanish. So I lived in Cuba for a while. And so oraculos is kind of indicative of a reading, or basically a reading that you receive is kind of an oracle, basically. And so that's what oraculos means. But really, I made the name up. For a long time, we were Tarot Dharma, because I thought that Tarot Dharma would be understandable to people as me merging the Eastern mystery tradition with the Dharma and the Western mystery tradition with the Tarot. And that completely went over people's heads, and all people saw was Tarot. And therefore, all people thought I did was Tarot, which was a bummer, because the tarot as a system, it embodies so much more than just a deck of playing cards. It also embodies astrology and geomancy and numerology and Kabbalah and Hermeticism and alchemy. And I thought that tarot dharma would be suggestive of all of that, but all people saw was tarot, and they thought I was Miss Cleo, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. Fortunately, she's retired, so that's gonna fade away over time, brother.
Exactly. So we retired the name. I retired the name Tarot Dharma, and I changed it to the Oraculos School of Modern Alchemy, because I thought that that would somehow bring the point more fuller home, that we weren't just an astrology school or a tarot school, but we really held space for all of these parts of the Western mystery tradition and magic and all of these things. And that also kind of went over people's heads, because I think everybody in the 21st century has some idea of what they think alchemy is, but nobody really has the clearest idea of what alchemy is in terms of the general consumer population. And so people didn't get it either. So I retired that name, and I said, what could I do that really encapsulated what it would be? I played around with the name Bryan School of Astrology for a while, but then that kind of felt too much, which at this yeah, exactly. Which at this moment in my life, I'm kind of thinking that there is some value in owning my own name. A friend of mine, Jessica Lanyadu, her brand is Lanyadu, basically. And I never thought my name was as fancy as Jessica Lanyadu to build a whole brand around it. And who knows where that's from. But the point is, I kind of pushed the Mychal Bryan School of Astrology aside. And I raked my brain for weeks and weeks and weeks to figure out what can I name it. And then it just came to me that I should name it Oraculos School of Astrology. And I think I named it Oraculos because it sounded kind of Harry Potter-ish, and it gave this feeling of I don't know, have you ever watched the X-Men?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
So it kind of gave this feeling of like Dr. Xavier's School of Extraordinary Children. It felt mysticky, pop culture, like it just felt like a thing. So I named it the Oraculos School of Astrology, not knowing that it would become what it became today. And I've I've struggled over the years with the name of the school, because I was like, Mychal, this really doesn't mean anything. You literally just was sitting down on your bed and you just chose to name it this. And so I've been contemplating a name change for a while, but I don't know. There's a lot of momentum that's been built behind it, and it seems kind of reckless at this point to do a name change and a whole logo redesign. So I think as the years go by, I dig my heels deeper into this idea of the Oraculos School of Astrology, even though the word Oraculos doesn't really mean anything, but it has begun to mean things for people. And it's interesting as a creator of things. I was listening to somebody the other day talking about how prices are arbitrary and how all of us who sell knowledge, we just make it up. Like we just make our prices up and we don't really, I could choose to charge $50 for a workshop, or I could also choose to charge $250 for a workshop. We just make stuff up based on what feels in harmony and with an integrity with ourselves. And people buy it. And I think that as far as this idea of naming something is concerned, I feel kind of the same way with Oraculos. I just made it up. It didn't really have a majorly deep connection to me. I'm not attached to the word Oraculos at all. I just knew I was going to start a school. It needed to have a name. I needed to figure out what the name should be. And I named it Oraculos. And so I think my students are far more attached to the name Oraculos than I am. But I think that's kind of like an angst within me in general, where I'm quite satisfied, even if it's good. So
I get the impression you don't like being tied down to anything, but
I don't. I don't like to be tied down to anything that for me, it's all stupid. It's all so arbitrary. I don't like being tied down to things that don't actually have meaning. And so it just all seems like a game that we kind of have to play in order to say, oh, I have a brand and this is the name of that brand. And I love it. I love what I've created. I love what it means to people. I love the people who gravitate towards me as students. I love the fact that when I wrote this book, I was able to name the press Oraculos Press. I love the fact that I've created something, but I also know that it's also ephemeral and it doesn't even exist. And if I had chosen to call it the Dalai Lama School of Astrology, or if I chose to call it the Chubby Lama School of Astrology, it would be just as great. And it would just have a stupider name, the Chubby Lama, but it would be the same sort of thing. And so I'm happy with what I've made. I really feel grounded in it. And who knows, maybe it will have a name change in a year or two.
I recommend you keep it. You didn't ask me for my opinion, but I'm going to say it. I think when you create a word, which is what pharmaceuticals do every time they release a drug, there's a reason for that. And it's that there is no preconceived notions that can be cast upon your brand, that you have the ability to define who you are. And it also creates curiosity. It begs the question, what is Oraculus? Like, as soon as you have me asking a question, I'm now interested and hooked into knowing what it is. And it does sound Harry Potter. It sounds like a spell. It sounds like something that if I wave my wand and I say it, something's going to happen. But, I'm bringing it up really for our viewers to know that it seems to be really well thought out, really expansive in many different directions. I guess the one question I want to ask, and by the way, his website is oraculosastrology.com. We'll also put it up on the screen here. We'll put it also up in the chat for people to click on. Can I be a novice and go to your school? The only thing I noticed at your school was I've been an astrologer for 17 years. I didn't feel qualified. Like it seems like so in depth. Can someone be a beginner? Do you start from scratch all the way up to these expertise stalagmite extensions? Yes. Okay.
Definitely, definitely. I'll hold up the book because I haven't done that for the evening. So this is the book.
Yes.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Mastering Traditional Astrology, a depth of beginning the celestial art, correct?
Exactly. And so this is the book. And
it looks like a phone book. It's huge.
It's a phone book. This is the old one, and that's 646 pages because I don't want to get into the drama of that, but anyway, the index was ridiculously overwhelming. And I loved the person immensely who created the index in this first version of the book for me. I think he did a meticulous job in so much of the other things I asked him to do. And the index was just very difficult and it wasn't very user friendly. So I hired a company recently to make a new index for me. And it felt like 20 pages of weight have been lifted off of my chest. So whereas this book is 646 pages, the new book is 626 pages because they were able to chop it down by 20 pages, which I'm happy about. We'll go on, sorry.
Well, I guess my question was, I'd like to guide people to your site. It sounds like you've obviously in this interview shown us the depth of your wisdom And there's a lot of my followers are interested in becoming astrologers. So
Mhm.
what do you recommend if someone to go to your site? Where does one begin?
Right. So to your point, that's what I was getting at earlier. In terms of the book, I made this book because this represents the first 2 months essentially of what my students learn at Oraculos.
Oof,
And this
two
is
months.
this is the first 2 months of everything that I teach in the first 2 months of a student studying astrology. And that course is called The Foundations of Classical Astrology. It's a 4-month program. And the first 2 months is this book. And the next 2 months is the second book that I'm currently working on right now. And if I weren't talking to you, I'd be typing away, punching away at my keyboard because I'm planning to have it published in March or April for NORWAC, basically.
Yay.
Um, but so anyway, point is that we start from absolute zero. And I have astrologers who come in all of the time who have been practicing for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. And they say, hey, I've been practicing for so long, but I really feel like I need to ground myself someplace. And they take this course, which is a beginner's course, but my version of a beginner's course is somebody else's advanced course, basically. So I teach everybody from level zero, and I really don't care what your astrological background has been, who you've studied with. You could have studied with Ptolemy 2000 years ago. I don't care because I want for Oraculos is a community, it's a family. People stay together, they stay connected. We have a WhatsApp group that is humongous, and people talk to each other constantly back and forth, and they meet together and they make satellite groups. And the purpose of me starting everybody off at the same level zero is because I want you all to be able to speak the same language with each other. And more importantly, I want for myself to feel as if I'm surrounded by a community of astrologers who understand the language that I speak. And so everybody starts with level zero. And I've really only had two people in all of my years of teaching. I've had two people who felt as if it was too basic for them. And it's
That was
it's
probably Ptolemy reincarnated.
exactly. I mean, it's really sad because when you make that judgment after the first 2 weeks of a course, the first 3 weeks of a course, you're really missing out on a larger process that's happening. Anyway, so the point of the
Yeah.
matter that this is the book for the first 2 months. If people want to get a view of the curriculum, you can find everything within this book. This is the only book at the moment that has my brain in it, basically. And what I found this semester, this was the first semester I was able to teach with this book. And what I found this semester was it made a lot more sense for people to be in the class and for me to explain the concepts in the class and then for them to go and take the book and read it by themselves because they were using the book as a part of a larger course. And I won't say than them reading it by themselves alone, but I definitely found that the students who took the course this semester were like, oh, wow, I bought your book when you published it in May. But now that I'm taking this course with you in September and October, it's just landing differently inside me because I have you, the author, sitting here to explain to me some of these concepts. So now when I read those same chapters again, I feel like my eyes are open that much wider and I can receive the information that much deeper because I have this back and forth between you, the author, and this, the book. So point is, we
Yeah.
start at level zero. That course starts in September. If people want to join, it's not something you could sign up for at the moment because we have some other programs going on in January and February. But that course, The Foundations of Classical Astrology, starts in September, and it is the one course I tell people to take with me. If you could only take one course with me before I die or before you die, take the Foundations of Classical Astrology because I've everything that anybody needs to know and everything that anybody thought you needed to know 1,000 years ago up until this present moment in time is contained within that course, and it makes you feel solid in terms of not just the astrology that you practice, but why you practice astrology in that way.
Mm. And I would say a Virgo start for that course is appropriate to have the dexterity and concentration necessary to digest that phone book, but it looks phenomenal. But there's also some lighter options on your site too. I saw you have you also have master courses, basically, right? You have one called a master series on your website, Love and Divorce and the Natal Promise. That sounds really good. That hooked me. So if people want to slowly ingest, and also you have a YouTube channel as well, which is the Oraculos podcast, correct? And
Mm-hmm.
you do weekly videos, I noticed also. So you're sitting there doing the grind. Welcome to the grind. The planets never stop, brother. Would you recommend? I would say, I mean, I'm just say having getting to know you in these last couple of weeks. I think your YouTube videos are really a great start to get to understand the depth of what you offer. You got a lot of great stuff there, and of course, your website has tremendous amount of things. Is there anything in particular you recommend coming up right around the corner for someone?
Yeah, I so for years I had this impression that I needed to do this levelizing course, which is the foundations course for people to be a part of, for them to understand me and for me to understand them and blah blah blah. And now I think as I get older, I'm willing to relax around certain ideas I had previously. I went to ballet school in Cuba. And so I think that that was a very big part of me having a structured approach to what comes first and what you should learn first and what you should learn second. Because from a dance perspective, there are certain things that you have to learn them first, because if you don't learn them first, you're going to break your knee or you're going to, pop your Achilles tendon or something. So there are certain
Mm,
preparations that are necessary from a physical perspective, but I also think there are certain preparations that are necessary from an astrological perspective so that you don't break your brain, basically.
mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I've softened around that a lot. So we have a course coming up in January, January 30th, called Uranian Astrology for Practicing Astrologers.
Mm.
And it was very fearful for me to even release that to the public because I think everybody has a different impression of what it means to be a practicing astrologer. And I definitely have a specific impression of what it means to be a practicing astrologer. And so I opened this course up knowing that a lot of the people who would be signing up for the course come from different backgrounds and they haven't been through the equalizing process of taking my foundations program. But so I'm doing that and I'm going to swim, whatever happens, I'm going to swim, but I'm planning to give some very high level teaching regarding people who already have an astrology practice, who want to learn Uranian astrology. And really, the only requirement of it is for people to know how to identify aspects easily, not using the squiggly lines or the aspect grid, but by looking at a chart and knowing how to identify aspects. That's the only prerequisite. So if people want to know about aspects in a deeper way, and if they want to start practicing astrology from more of a planetary perspective as opposed to a zodiacal perspective, and not necessarily as opposed to, both things are fine, so zodiac astrology is fine. And I think we can say more nuanced things with a more planetary approach to astrology. So if people want to practice astrology from a more planetary perspective, they want to understand all the planetary aspects and really master that material, then definitely sign up for our Uranian Astrology for Practicing Astrologers course, which starts in January. And then I have a weekend workshop, which this is also the first time I've done a weekend workshop before, but I've really been pushing myself to get out of my mold of hooking people into studying with me for a minimum of 6 months, which usually is my model because I feel like I want to grow with a person, but whatever, it's 2024. And I said, why not teach a weekend workshop? So I'm teaching a weekend workshop, an intensive on astrocartography, which begins February 8th. It doesn't begin February 8th. It's going to be February 8th through that weekend, basically. And I'm going to teach people the foundations of astrocartography. I recently became certified in astrocartography, even though I had been practicing astrocartography for years and years. Like so many people, I think so many of us just practice astrocartography just because. And then I got certified and I realized that there are only 115 certified astrocartographers in the world, which is
Wow.
crazy because this is a system that came out in the 90s. Why there are only 115? So my New Year's resolution is to flood the world with certified astrocartographers. The exam is every June. Continuum is the organization that gives out the exam, the Continuum Astrocartography exam. It's only in June. So I'm trying to prepare a cohort of students to be able to take that exam so that we could have hundreds, thousands of people practicing astrocartography as certified astrocartographers. So if you want to do that, or if you just want to figure out where you should go for your next vacation, then sign up for my upcoming astrocartography weekend intensive.
Brilliant. And I did not know that. I think that'd be very valuable. That's with migration now literally happening in droves. I mean, the freedom to move about the planet like we never have, it just seems so relevant. And it comes up more and more and more and more in readings. So you might find me there staring at you in class, Mychal. Well, thank you for your generosity today and your generosity to the world. You have absorbed so much information and you've redigested it and presented it in very clean, understandable terms. I would love everyone to go check out your YouTube channel and your site. We'll put your site up again, and hopefully you and I can come together again in the future and talk. Now that we have the foundation, maybe we can elevate to a higher frequency of our natal programming and explore other destinies together.
Most definitely. I love that. And when Noel, yes,
Yes.
reached out to me, it just seems so serendipitous because I see you on YouTube all the time. And like I said, I think that you were one of the people who I saw and I was like, hey, I want to hold space to really speak myself and to really let more people hear my voice. And I was so impressed with how you were doing that and the sort of space that you were holding and the sort of space that you've held for years at this point. And so thank you so much for reaching out and having me here. It's really been so pleasurable. I mean, I've been interviewed in other spaces before, and not all of them have been as nice as this. And I think that you're phenomenal, you're amazing, and I really, really enjoy being here with you this evening.
Thank you, sir. I hope you have a wonderful 2024. It's a pleasure. And I know my viewers will consider you as family now. So please drop in and say hi at any time. And maybe perhaps we can collaborate on something in the future. That'd be wonderful.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And as another special thanks to Mychal. That was a phenomenal interview. We went super deep. We went a little long, and you can see we've only just touched upon his wisdom and his knowledge. I look forward to having him back in the future. He's got a lot of great stuff coming up this year. And we want to say thank you. First of all, let me just say the countdown to 2024. This is the biggest thing I have to promote. It's going to happen on January 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. This is a full-on seminar to go over the week. We'll go over the year of 2024 and launching the new era. I'm going about it a different way than I have in the past. The last few years that I've done it, I sort of overloaded the audience with information. I'm just going to stick to concepts this year. I'm going to stick to key dates that you need to know of when you want to have certain things completed by, when you want to have things in the pipeline by. And if you go back to the beginning of the show, when I was talking about how 1/3 of our audience is going to, or 1/3 of the world, could be our whole audience, is going to launch in a new era and be leaders in the new age, I'm going to really focus on helping those people to really launch their new age in this webinar. So if you'd like to be a part of it, come to newyears.guru, get on the email list to be notified of a discount code, or once the tickets are live, you go straight to the site. You can purchase them. It is a live webinar that is on Zoom, so you will have a chance to ask questions at the end. And yes, it is recorded, so you can continue to listen to it for the rest of the year. SeriousJoy.com is the sponsor of Namaste Today Live, and we are a spiritual service that is by your side every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We are here for you. We are always with you at Serious Joy, and you can check it out for just $3.99. If you want to kickstart this year in the right way, I recommend you do it with a little help. We have a full team of enlightened professionals, and we know your chart. Some say we know you better than you do. Just saying. Now, we also have some other features. For one, this week going live, Jo Zammit, our local artisan, well, not local, she's from Australia, but she sure feels local. She'll be going live this week with the new moon ceremony video to help you have ceremony around this new moon in Capricorn. We like to do some practical hands-on, and we think that making it physical and having artifacts that we create not only makes it memorable, but really makes it symbolic and rich. Together, she says, we can co-create an artifact which not only beautifies your life, but acts as a symbol to refocus you on your heart's truest intentions. That video goes live here in a couple of days. Also, last week, you might have caught it if you're a subscriber. If not, we had Angel Intervention with Devin Dorr and Heather Exposito. These two ladies sort of did a tag team where Devin does angel downloads and readings for 3 of our subscribers, and Heather interviews and chimes in with astrological knowledge. We had 3 subscribers who gave us a dilemma, and we had the angel advice as well. This is a great show, one of our most popular on the network, exclusively at SeriousJoy.com. This week, we have Keeping It Real with Kristen Ryder. She's going to be coming on and helping 3 subscribers as well. We cast directly from our pool of subscribers. Keeping It Real is sort of our spiritual talk show here at Serious Joy, where we get really deep and nitty gritty about some of the truth of the astrology and living in the astrology in the moment. It's a great show. It will be live exclusively for our subscribers on January 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on SeriousJoy.com. You know, people ask, what can I do for you, Sensei? Especially if you don't have money and you don't have the affordability of what we offer for products. Sharing is caring, my friend. If you can just share our horoscopes, which come out on Tuesdays, the recuts of our horoscopes, or share the special yearly horoscope I put out with Chris Reck and myself. We put that out last week. Share it to your friend. Share it to your friend who's a Scorpio or a Taurus or a Leo or a Pisces and see what they say. Just introducing us with your power of suggestion is the best way we can grow organically. Some people do like to donate, and we humbly take tips or donations at paypal.me/Sensei Christopher, paypal.me/Sensei Christopher. We also have a group on Facebook, a club, if you will. We call it Serious Joy Club, which is at seriousjoy.club. This is a club like no other. We have a lot of engagement with our club members. We allow people who have lightworking businesses to advertise in the club. We have a human design study group. We have live videos where people pull questions and answer questions. Really, Facebook has become sort of a desert. It hasn't really been very active, except in our club. We're very active, and I do all my personal posts in the club, by the way. So if you want to know what I'm doing in my free time, come to the club at seriousjoy.club. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we put out a zodiac weather 7 days a week where I summarize the zodiac weather. We're on all social media. We also here on YouTube, we post those. Just come to seriousjoy.social for our linked tree, and we'll give you the goods to where to go. And if you'd rather listen instead of watch, we do make this an audio podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. All right, friends, I want to do a special thanks to our producer, Noelle Way, our director, Sarah Lyman, my business partner, Eben Freeman, and our teaching staff at Serious Joy, Robbie Hunt, Kristen Ryder, Devin Dewar, Joe Zammit, and Heather Exposito. And also another special thanks to our super friends out there for making these chats so enjoyable and fun. That wraps up another great week here of Namaste Today. Again, this was pre-recorded. I'll be back live next week. But until then, remember, I love you. Live, love, be.
It's serious.